How's everybody feeling? Okay, I'm going to kick us off. I'll be brief. I just want to say, first of all, thank you. Some of you were there yesterday. We had a really limited list. I apologize. There was only, Topgolf was adamant, 50 people max for that event yesterday. Having said that, we had a great turnout of people that have been involved from day one. I'm sorry more staff couldn't be there. And thank you so much, staff, Barbara, your department, everyone, Darnell, Stevie. It was flawlessly executed. Daryl, Joe, everyone was involved in this process. Rexham Park, everyone, thank you. And it felt so good. That was a decade-long endeavor. And so I think it's a fitting opening and reminder of how long things take, particularly in government, because of the public process and disclosure and due process. And then I think about this, and Jan reminded me that we started this strategic planning process in 2016 when Carol, Don, and I first got in council. We hadn't done it for years, and we revisited this process. What I love about this process is, and Carol will be here any minute. By the way, I think she's running a little bit late, but what I love about this process is it forces us to take time away from the everyday grind of work to focus on what's really important, which is building the future. It forces us to reflect on what's important, what are the priorities for the city, and then even more importantly, to collaborate, to work together. So if you think, some of you were here in 2016, 2018, we went through this process. We had Post-it notes all over the wall, all of the walls, right? Jan led it. It was an incredible process, and really great ideas bubbled up from that process. You remember, right? You were there. Mark, you were there. Joe, you were there. So I'm really looking forward to this. I love these planning sessions, and I know some great stuff's going to come out of here. And at the end of the day, we're going to have alignment. We're going to have an alignment in terms of what's really important from the staff's perspective, from the constituent standpoints, from the businesses standpoints, and from the council standpoint. We will all be aligned when we walk out of here at what time?
No later than 5.
No later than 5, 1700. You heard it here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, thanks. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Jan. Thanks you all for being here.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. So, Daryl, do you want to give a little welcome yourself? And we have to use this because we're being recorded.
Okay. Well, likewise, good afternoon, everyone. And just on behalf of staff, I want to thank particularly the council and fellow department heads for undertaking this process. I've been involved in local government now for 36 years. I worked for a number of cities. I won't say good cities and bad cities, but well-run cities and those that have not been so well-run. And I found that cities that go through this strategic plan process on a regular basis, which I know El Segundo has done, are those cities that are well-run. And as the interim here for the last 5 weeks, I certainly appreciate that. And because, the other cities, I think they utilize the budget process as their strategic plan. And a lot, we all have to go through the budget process, but that is a totally different process than going through the strategic planning process. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. I look forward to a very enlightening afternoon. And everyone, please offer and participate because your voice needs to be heard. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Great. Okay. So, Mayor, would you like to call on any public comments if there are any?
Defer to you to do
Okay. Are there any members of the public, on behalf of the mayor, who would like to speak? Now is your opportunity. Do you give 3 minutes? Is that what you do? Seeing none? Okay. We will move on. Okay. Well, yeah, I would clip it on, but a couple of us are going to speak, so, but please do remind me and maybe hold up your hand if I'm not speaking into it. I will try very hard to do that. So I'm Jan Perkins with Management Partners, very happy to be here again with the City of El Segundo. I think it's very impressive that you do strategic planning. I'd like to introduce my two colleagues, Michelle New, if you'll just raise your hand, and Jared Berguan, raise your hand as well. The three of us will be assisting you today and guiding the process. So a couple of objectives for the day, as you can see up on the PowerPoint. One is to, at the end of the day, we hope to have council consensus on the strategies to be included in the updated strategic plan for the next 4 years. So we'll go through a discussion process, and by before 5 o'clock to have council consensus. That may mean there are some changes, may mean some new ones that are added, may mean some that are deleted, but consensus on the final group of strategies. And then importantly, council priorities for the first 2 years. So as we've done in the past, once we talk through the various strategies, then we'll go through the always loved dot voting process as a way to narrow for the council to determine what your top priorities for the first couple of years would be. So we'll go through that. So again, by the end of the day, we'll have that council direction, which is so important so you can then align your resources, both staff and budgetary, toward that end. So the agenda for the rest of the afternoon, okay, the clicker, thank you so much, Liana. First of all, I actually would like to recognize Liana for all of her hard work in pulling this together. So we're going just to give first just an overview and the input that was provided as part of the strategic planning process, including input from the commissions, committees, and boards, highlights of progress. We worked with the executive team on refining the values. It had been quite a number of years since those had been looked at, so we want to go over that with the council and get your thoughts. And then most of the time today, though, is going to be spent on the content of the goals and strategies and priorities. Before we wrap up, though, we do want to spend just a few minutes on how progress is going to be reported and hear any comments from council members about that as well, and Darryl will take the lead on that. Oops. The ground rules are just always the ones that we have for this, so we can be efficient with our time, listening to each other to understand each other's points of view, engaging today, assuming good intent. We have lots of points of view. A lot of work has been done to get to this point. And then, of course, staying focused so we can get out of here on time with some outcomes that we are planning. We'll use the bike rack today as a way to keep track of anything that perhaps needs to be followed up on outside of today as a time management tool. So just starting out, just very briefly, the strategic plan that you've had for quite some time, it's a policy document, which is why the City Council is the one that ultimately owns it, along with the executive team, establishing the vision and direction, and establishes major work efforts, but it's not a task list. And one of the things that we've attempted to do in this year in refreshing it and in trying to simplify the document a bit is to keep it up on the balcony as much as possible so that the things that are in it, we hope, as we go through those with the council, are those that really reflect policy direction and will require a substantial allocation of resources so that they're really the important things, but not minor tasks that should be in a departmental work plan. As we know, getting anything done requires both goals, but also requires teamwork, which is why it's not an accident that we have the setup that we have here today. We like to have council members and the executive team working together, and so we thought, well, good way to start that is to have the table arrangement this way. So as we start talking through some of the specific strategies, there may very well be some questions and conversation about those that will be very helpful to have that conversation with the department heads. In terms of the timeline, we started back in February, and the very first step were interviews with members of the council, and hopefully you all remember that. I know it was a few months ago. Jared and I together interviewed you on Zoom, and we asked about your priorities. We asked your thoughts about the strategic plan. And then we gathered information from staff through gap analysis, and of course the staff provided a lot of information on the existing strategic plan. And then we had an executive team meeting to go over a lot of material in March. And then Barbara, in a couple of minutes, is going to talk about the input from the committees, commissions, and boards. And then here we are today. After today, we will be finalizing the strategic plan, which then will be presented for adoption in early June, along with the budget, is the schedule. So, Jared?
Can everybody hear me? All right. So my name is Jared Berguan. Pleasure to be with you today. So a little bit of the work that we did leading up to this and to this meeting today is, as Jan said, we started off with council interviews that were done on Zoom. We had done those with all the council folks to get your input on the plan. We also, from staff, got a status report on the existing strategic plan. So everything that's been done from 2016 forward to this point, a review of those and where they were with each of those. We then provided a questionnaire to staff in the form of a gap analysis to find out where the deficiencies were, what things needed to be worked on, the results of which are included in this. And then staff also provided or conducted an environmental scan, kind of a snapshot of the community and where things are. You'll get a report on that here in a moment. And then finally, Barbara in a few minutes is going to present input from, I believe you call them CCBs here, commissions, committees, and boards. And then finally, the highlights from the council comments that we got. This came as a result of the interviews that we did on Zoom. And these are kind of collectively summarizing what many of the comments were. But importantly, you do consider that the plan is a guiding document, guides your decisions. It is frequently referred to and comes up during council meetings to help with decision making. Very complimentary of staff and doing a good job at implementing the plan and keeping the plan on track. And most importantly, that the budget has been aligned historically with the plan, which is very complimentary of the city and its position. Staff also council also provided a variety of priorities, and we'll go over that in a few minutes as well. And then finally, we went over each of the goal categories, and collectively, with the exception of just a couple minor edits, the goals are all still very relevant, and that's a good sign as well. Barbara.
Okay, thank you. So we reached out to each of the committees, commissions, and boards, and we asked a very simple question. Well, first of all, you all have this memo in your packet, so all of the feedback that we received is contained in this memo. But we just asked them, what are your 3 important priorities for attention in the next 4 years for the City of El Segundo? So we did not limit it to just their committee, commission, or board. We wanted to just hear from these community leaders and these engaged members of the community what they thought would be the best thing for the city to be working on in the next 4 years. So in some cases, we got very specific responses that were relevant to their committee, commission, or board. In other cases, they just looked holistically at all of our strategic goals and provided feedback. So the way this is organized, Arts and Culture Committee, the CCB on the left-hand column, that's just a member of that committee. So you'll see committees listed twice. So we didn't receive a whole lot of feedback. Wish we could have gotten more. But I sent it via email to all the CCBs, and I gave them a deadline. So if there is desire to have more feedback from the CCBs or more specific feedback from the CCBs, then I think this is the time to bring that up, and we can still go to each board meeting and ask them specifically for more feedback. For example, I didn't receive any feedback from the committee I work on, which is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, even though I personally sent several emails. But you know, at the next meeting, I certainly can bring that up, and other staff who represent, or our staff to different committees can also bring it up at their meetings. Yes?
How much notice did they get for it?
2 weeks.
And how many responses did we get?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
As far as I'm concerned, I don't know how the council feels, but they kind of missed the boat.
Yeah.
You gave them notice, and they didn't take advantage of it, which is unfortunate. Maybe next year we could revisit that, but I wouldn't want to slow the process down.
Okay. Yeah, I think the original intent was to go to each meeting, but we didn't end up doing that.
It is on, okay. I actually think that going forward on this, or maybe even coming back on this, is that the input from the board should be in their purview. What do they feel they should be working on or can work on within the scope of their responsibilities? I think in some cases it was done as I read through it, but in some cases it was not, and I think that might be a good corrective.
Yeah, that point's well taken. We actually put in the email, feel free to comment on things outside of your, narrow it down. Mhm.
I would echo that. I think it's probably, if we want their input, it's best to put it on one of their agendas and then be like, hey, here's an agenda item for you guys. Do you guys have input with the strategic plan? Because otherwise you get kind of and oh, by the way, I'd like one of these.
Right, right. Or the issue of the moment that they happen to be thinking about.
That's right.
When they're writing the email, yeah. Understood. That's all I had for that. If there are any other questions. All right. Oh, Carol.
So I think, like, this is a long-term plan. Right? This is something we're gonna annualize, over time. So maybe we start off, since we didn't get a great response at the beginning of it, but once we finalize it, and we say, okay, here's our strategic plan goals, then we bring it, and one of us each go to one of each of the committees, and we present it, and we say, now we want you to think about, here's our strategic goals, as you as a commission member, committee member, how do you take that information and work with your committee
Right.
to make those come to reality?
So
right?
one thing I heard from a council member, and it might have been you, I can't remember, but that the strategic plan feeds into the work plan of each CCB.
Correct.
So if they look at what we decide to be the final strategic plan, and they develop their work plan from that as part of their annual work plan process.
And then that way, so it's basically we're just starting them later.
Yeah.
And then when it comes around for the next cycle, they'll be more apt to give us feedback because they were at the
They're
beginning.
thinking that way too.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think what would be nice is if one of us each take a committee, we present it as our council that we've adopted this, and we'll talk to them about what it means to that committee, what commission, and how do we then, empower them to think outside the box and say, okay, how do we, and then they can present ideas back to us on how they can make our goals and our objectives a reality.
Right. All right, thank you. Who's next, Dan?
Okay, thank you for that input. So I think next we have Joe talking about the status report on the current strategic plan. This is part of the accountability. Before we move forward, it's good to see what happened last time.
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. So we have total up, so first of all, the current plan started in 2019. So we have 2019, 2020 was year one of this current plan, which was a 3-year plan. 2020, 21, and then 21, 22, the year we're in right now, is year 3 of our current plan. So 2 of those years were covered by COVID. So obviously that presents enormous amount of challenges. But with that, there was a total of 67 work activity items under all the goals, under each of the total of the 5 goals. 47 of those were completed. To me, that's pretty amazing. 17 of them are underway, so either will be completed by this June 30th or shortly thereafter. And all of you should have this handout that depicts all 67 goals, and whether they're green, yellow, or red. So again, I think that's a testament to staff that is here working very, very hard to complete, council's direction, strategic direction, especially. I want to reiterate with COVID and all the challenges that presented. So it's again a huge testament to staff's dedication. 3 items that were not completed. One, I'm just going to touch on them real quick. One is streamlining the contract policy for greater efficiency and effectiveness. That's going to be addressed in the new plan that's coming up. Develop a veterans recognition program. That's also going to be addressed. And then the third item is relief for low property tax cities. That's going to take legislation at the state level in Sacramento to address. Okay, so factors since adoption of our current plan, so since 2020, obviously a lot has happened. One is soaring housing costs. That's a huge factor. Two, effects of the pandemic. We all lived through that and know firsthand what exactly that means. Three, pension control strategies. So I believe most of you are aware, but just to reiterate high level, last year, Council approved issuing pension obligation bonds and refunding our debt with CalPERS, so just a little bit over $140 million in pension debt at CalPERS that the city was paying about 7% rate of interest on that to CalPERS. We issued pension obligation bonds and got a fixed rate of just under 2.6%. That's a huge amount of savings, and to kind of put it in perspective, for next year, it's going to be a little over $4 million in payments that we're saving. That could be utilized towards, obviously, good initiatives that are on the strategic plan. Another item is re-imaging policing. A lot of issues have happened. Policy discussions have happened around that in the last couple of years. Tight labor markets. We're seeing that. We're trying to fill vacant positions, particularly Rebecca in HR, and all of us department heads are trying to fill our positions. It's a very tight labor market out there, and it's difficult to find high caliber employees to fill the vacant positions. New state housing mandates, SB 9, SB 10, and many others I'm sure are going to be coming down the pipeline. And then other state unfunded mandates. So these are all big factors that have happened since 2020 and have big impacts on the city.
Daryl, are you going to?
These are all pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, they are. And you might just say Portland.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm going to give Portland the props on these next two slides. So I will share them. Thank you, Portland, for putting all this valuable information together. I mean, you folks know better than I do this data, median income, age, relatively young population, housing growth, 0.72 increase in new housing units between 2010 and 2020. Of course, the infamous regional housing needs allocation of 521 units. Owner-occupied households, significantly lower than the renter-occupied households of 56%. Under the category of jobs, over 55% of jobs held by El Segundo residents are in management, business, science and arts, and another 30% in service, sales, and office. 7 of LA County's largest private sector employers are in El Segundo. That's an amazing statement on behalf of our city. Many new mandates require compliance, and all are unfunded, as Joe just pointed out. For the budget, expenditures are outpacing revenues. Rising costs and aging public infrastructure, gas tax revenue declining. I wonder if that number's still the same as these gas prices hit $7 a gallon. You know, that's interesting. And then, again, following up on one of Joe's points, the city positions vacancy rate much higher than in the past at 14%. Unlike other cities, much more challenging to recruit. I know, again, in the number of the cities that I still associate with, this is definitely a challenge for a lot of cities, us included. Thank you. Yes.
So the age of population, I think that may be different than what our perception was. Because I know we had talked about, looking for age in place. Like one of our goals was to have like a age in place to accommodate some of our seniors. I think it would be interesting to see when that shifted, because I bet you if you look back 5-10 years ago, that was different. So I think
Interesting, yeah.
that second bullet, age of population, I think we need to be cognizant of that as we go through
Great point.
our strategic planning, because we never really talked about that demo.
Yeah.
25% are 18 or younger. So
Yeah.
I think we just.
Great
we should
point.
just keep
Yeah,
the point, keep that.
absolutely.
Can I echo that? If you look at the 2010 and 2020 census numbers, we are reasonably constant on the youth piece, on the young, with slightly different density per household, but that is a decline in 65 and over, which could be people taking profit on their house and moving out.
Moving out.
But either way, we made an emphasis on this last time to be age-friendly, and if it's not successful, it could be people taking profit and moving to Arizona, but if people feel like they can't age in place, that's an issue we need to be cognizant of.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay.
Okay, so the 10-year forecast, the famous 10-year forecast. This year, we will end up expenditures higher than revenues, and that was in the adopted budget. And we utilize several methods, to ensure that we maintained all of our reserves per council policy and fund all the projects that we could in the strategic plan. So that's 2022, that's where we're expected to end. For 2023, that's still being developed, but preliminary numbers look like revenues and expenditures are going to come in pretty close, about both $82 million. Again, very preliminary. That still will change as we continue to develop the budget. And our first budget study session with the council is May 3rd. And then the years going out, again, we're just making some assumptions there. Expenditures increasing about 2.5% to 3%, different categories. Revenues, very, very consistent here. Since I've been here 6 years now, revenues, take out COVID, obviously. We're about 2% per year on our revenues. So the expenditures are increasing at a greater percentage than the revenues. So as you get out to the out years, again, we're kind of out of whack with a balanced budget. Much better than what it looked like prior to the POBs. If you recall, we were heading into an abyss within the next 3 or 4 years. But so the pension obligation bonds shaved, about $4 to $5 million off per year from the expenditures.
So, Joe, I have a question. So obviously this is not sustainable because you can't, year after, for what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years have revenues lower than expenditures.
Right.
What is the total from, so obviously starting in 2026, or actually 2025 is when you're seeing that trend. From 2025 to 2031, what is the total deficit?
So that's that trend line. It might be a little hard to see, but it's gray colored.
Yeah.
And then the numbers on the far right is, so the fund balance going from just a little over 18 million down to under 2 million by 2031.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and what this also makes assumptions of is no additional investment into capital projects. What else? Again, expenditure is about 2.5% to 3%.
No major loss of revenue.
Correct.
Large employers leaving.
Correct. That is correct. And then just to also touch on the revenues real quick. So again, all of our revenues have come back to the pre-pandemic levels, with the exception of the TOT. So TOT was just above 15 million pre-pandemic. We dropped to 7.5 million. This year, we're going to end just under 11 million. So we've come back from that 7.5, but we're still far below the 15 that we were pre-pandemic. For next year, we're making the assumption that it's going to be about $11.5 million in TOT revenue. So our trend for the last, 6, 7 months has been anywhere from 75 to 80% occupancy. Fluctuates, but between that. And pre-pandemic, we were closer to 90, low 90s% occupancy. So we still haven't come back. And then the room rates at some of the hotels are also lower than where we were pre-pandemic.
Right. Well, and with airfare and gas escalating, you may see that not come back as fast as you had anticipated.
Right, and also El Segundo is unique. The vast majority of our hotel stays were business-related rather than leisure. And that's, some of the business community has permanently adopted going Zoom meetings and not traveling to locations, but having their meetings over the internet.
So Joe, does this assume just an annual revenue percent increase every year? So nothing out of no new revenue source?
No new revenue sources, correct.
What about
Right.
like one-time infusions for whatever that's just kind of?
No. No, Top Golf is in there, so that's ongoing. But yeah, no one-time revenue injections. With the exception, in 2022, we do have the ARPA dollars that came in. That was one-time money from the federal government.
And you didn't build any increase in like 2028 when we have the Olympics coming?
No.
So there's that component as well, which we could anticipate there be an increase in hotel stays.
Correct.
DOT from that.
Correct. There absolutely could be. We were hoping that from the Super Bowl. There was some, but it wasn't as positive as I was hoping.
Presuming the Olympics come off, there's 30-odd events that will be in between the Torrance complex around Dominguez Hills and in Inglewood. So we could see a significant bump just because we have a logistical advantage.
Yep.
But nothing on the beaches.
Yeah, and I can build that in if council wants to see that. I can build that in for the Olympics.
No, I mean, it was just a note, like
Yeah. Any other questions on this particular slide? Okay. Hand it back over to you, Jim.
Bake sale at Boyle's house.
Big sale.
Big bake sale.
Okay. Are there any questions from council on any of those slides that we've shown so far? Yes, Mayor.
I got one interesting stat. We get this directory of all the city councils of the 88 cities in LA County, and I typically peruse those. Here's a stat I've been telling Barbara for 3 years now. We're the most important 5 square miles economically in Southern California, and I'm dead set to prove that with some data points. Here's one that I just learned of. What city in LA County do you think has the highest average salary? I'm giving it away. Like $20,000 more than Beverly Hills. So there's another data point for you. If that doesn't scream we've got the most highly educated intellectual capital in all of Southern California, nothing else does. So we've got somewhat of a bleak picture. Joe, you're always good at pointing those out. Thank you. But you can counter that with we've got so much opportunity to draw upon here as well. So there's that. Thank you.
That is a very interesting data point. Who knew? Okay, we're going to look ahead now. So we've been looking back and looking around, so now let's look ahead. So I'm going to move forward in looking at the strategic plan. So first of all, just to provide a little bit of a perspective on what's changed, as I started out by saying we're trying to do a bit of a refresh on the strategic plan. So these are just some of the key items to give you first an overview. Some refinements to some of the goal names. We'll go over those just in a moment. Some refinements to the definitions of strategic initiatives and objectives, just some wording. The strategies have certainly been updated, and as you take a look at the document, I think you'll see inside a little bit of a format change too, because we wanted to be able to show to the council which ones are continuing from the prior strategic plan. So if you just randomly open up any, let's just say page 8, for instance, which ones of the strategies are continuing, because this is a strategic plan that is ongoing, and many of those strategies in the past have been accomplished, as Joe mentioned, but some of them are ongoing, so they will be continuing. But then others are new, and so we wanted the council to be cognizant of which ones were new. So the format has been changed a little bit. And then the values, we're going to go through that just in a moment, have been consolidated and refined and defined. And then key performance measures, indicators, KPIs. Those were included a number of years ago, and they also need refreshing. And so we actually have pulled those out of this document, but have put into the document a strategy to do a complete review of the KPIs. So that for KPIs to be useful and meaningful, they need to be ones that can be tracked. They need to be ones that the data can be easily gathered, and the measurements can then be used for making improvements. And so it's an opportunity to do that refresh. Yes, Mayor?
You guys hear me? Does that work?
I think that's on. That should be on.
One of the things council did when we did Scott Mitnick's performance review, you guys will recall, is we went through every one of the 5 strategic priorities and we whittled the metrics down to 2 or 3 per. Do you guys remember that exercise? I still have that document handwritten. I will get it to whomever you think I should, Daryl and Joe, because council had that discussion and closed and whittled that number down to be much more salient, only 2 to 3 metrics per each of the 5 priorities. So we have that.
Okay, so that'll be a good starting point for that review. That's great. Thank you. So first, we'd like to get some input from the City Council on the values. So the document prior to the draft that is in front of you has had, and I'm going to just flip to that, a list of values, all of which are, very good, meaningful values, but they weren't defined. And for values, for a city organization to have a list of values, it is better when there are a few that can be remembered. And the way they have been in the strategic plan, again, they're all perfectly good values, there's so many that it would be difficult for anybody to list them off the top of their head. So at the March session with the executive team, we went through a discussion and narrowed them to 3, still capturing all of the concepts within the list. So nothing actually was lost, but we whittled them down to 3, service, ethics, and collaboration, and then defined them. So now what we would like is to get some feedback from the City Council and see what you think about those, and see if those make sense from your vantage point, because it's your document as well.
Can you just go back one more slide?
Yes, I sure can. And we've retained the culture attributes in the new document. Those have been retained. It's just the values.
Can you go, I'm sorry, Kelly, you don't have to?
Go right ahead.
No, you can go to the next.
Yeah.
I think these are great because they're easy to remember. They're what we're trying to do, and it's something for everyone to get behind. So I think whoever did the work on this did a really good job. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that comment.
You just want consensus? I think it's fantastic. It's easily digestible. I think any new employee that would come on or anybody curious about our community can see this and understands clearly what the board of directors, aka the council, expects of the executive team and any employee below them. I think it's fantastic.
Okay, good. Everybody on board with us?
Great job.
All right. Seeing no negatives?
Once you get the answer you want, you move on.
Exactly.
Declare victory and leave.
After you get
Exactly.
yes, keep going.
Keep going, okay. So now, we're going to spend most of our time here, just from a process point of view, which is what this is. What we've done is we've actually changed, in the old strategic plan, you used the term activities. We've changed that to strategies. And we've tried to, as I mentioned earlier, eliminate the things that are really like a small task that ought to be in a department's management plan. And we tried to make it more at a strategic level. Oops, I need to keep this up here, I think. And so we've renamed that. And so we're going to be going over those. The questions for the council as we go through each one of the goal areas will be, first of all, there is one goal name that's been changed, and we'll go through that, and we want to find out if it's acceptable. And then in looking at all of the strategies for each goal, we want to find out, have the council's policy interests been captured? And then, or did we miss something? And then, do you concur or are changes needed? Or maybe there's something in there that you disagree with, which is entirely possible too. So that's what we plan to do next. At first, Jared's just going to highlight what we heard from council members as to what was important to you to be included.
So as I said earlier, we interviewed each of you council members via Zoom, and we took into account all of those priorities that you had, and all of them are listed in the draft strategic plan that is in front of you. But individually going through them, and some of these are a little bit of language that might be specific to just El Segundo, but to make progress on the Smoky Hollow development, to address issues related to housing, including SB 9 and 10, as well as housing east of PCH, ensure the city has a predictable fiscal plan, determine how to fund capital improvements, rebuild the clubhouse, and I understand everybody in the room understands what the clubhouse means, encourage economic development as well as early stage company growth, examine ways to ensure cost-effective police services, define issues and develop solutions related to parking issues, encourage the Metro Rideshare program, the need to enhance the fiber or create the fiber infrastructure within the city, and then ways to match fire service models to the types of calls that the fire department responds to, and also to right-size the city, determine the appropriate number of staff needed for the various city services.
Okay, so we just wanted to let you know that we were taking careful notes. We tried to capture everything, but if we miss something, today is about determining what those things might be.
I think you kind of captured it with encourage economic development. Can you go back one, please, Jan?
Yep.
The encourage economic development. And I know you don't want to get into tactics, but this is still a strategy. One idea that I brought forward, I think it was 2 years ago now, was the idea of a public-private partnership incubator
Okay.
that would fall under this. And we had unanimous support from the council. We've since spoken to Richard Lundquist. I was just on the phone with him a couple hours ago. Second time talking to him. He still loves the idea. Dr. Patrick Soon-Chung supports the idea. Janice Hahn supported the idea. Now we have to pitch Holly Mitchell. Autumn Burke loved the idea. We'll find out who replaces her. Al Marisucci loves the idea, as does Senator Ben Allen. So we already have support from other elected officials. I was on the phone with the governor's office today, External Affairs. That was the first time they heard it, but they might be interested. So that's something that's going to take a fair amount of effort. And I know, Barbara, the ball's in my court on this because I owe you that model, the straw man of what it will look like and everything else. I just don't want us to lose sight of it. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't include on, as one of our strategies, that one, because I didn't see it in there. I just perused the list earlier, Jan. So that's something real that we can do that will have a meaningful impact on growing early stage companies in our economic development.
Okay. Michelle has made a note of that, and as we go through each one of the goals, we'll also double check to see if something's been included. I don't see it actually listed under goal 5, so that's been noted, and when we get to that, we might want to explore a little bit more of the wording so we understand what that is. But and I'm sure Barbara can help with that too. Okay, what else? What other comments might council members have right now before we start going through goal by goal? Yes.
So the only one on this is, rebuild the clubhouse. I think we need to take a bigger picture, a more holistic view of Parks and Recs, and look at it from what do we want it to look like 10 years from now, and then we can phase it in. But just fixing the clubhouse is very 10,000 feet, where we really need to look at it at 100,000 feet.
Good, yeah, that's a good point. And when we go into,
Needs assessment. 45-minute conversation at council about, what do they call it? They call it a multi-generational
But we
building.
never approved it.
I'm not saying we approved it, I'm saying we discussed it for 45 minutes. I mean, they did, they zoomed out, and they took a blimp level view of what was needed in the needs assessment and, getting rid of Joslin Center and moving, senior activities to a multi-generational building, and we carried on that conversation, and that was exactly what you're saying, which is zoom out and take a holistic view. And so that's what they did, and we just paid people to do that. And that's what they brought to us, and so I don't want to tell staff to, hey, go do that again,
No,
and they're
no,
going to
no.
bring something
No,
similar
I'm not
back.
saying to do it again, but we need to finalize that discussion. We talked about it and walked away.
Yeah, I think that's in goal 4. We've got, when we get to goal 4, the implement the Rec and Park Master Plan.
Right.
And that's included in that.
It's in there, just as a reference point, thank you, John Jones.
Yes.
So the needs assessment is kind of being pulled at this point because the Civic Day project has been put in front of it to let the kids give their feedback. I think it's a perfect and relevant time, right after they get that feedback to you, then we have that joint meeting that we were wanting to have with the Park and Rec Commission and the council to then solidify that discussion again and then to get it back on track. That's just a thought.
And Carol, I'll say this, that's mine. Thank you, Jan, for putting it on there, and I'm glad that everyone in the room knows what the clubhouse is. 'Cause if you don't know what the clubhouse is, I invite you to leave.
Is that next to the big pong tables?
Yep, right next to the ping pong tables. But no, I put that on there because I think the last time we went through this process, Joe's really good at the, bright future outlaying there. And we worked really hard, and it was all about how can we make ourselves fiscally sustainable for the future. And I think this council and the council prior took steps in that direction. But what I have seen now, this being, Chris, it's been 4 years. 4 years since we've been here. Going into extra time, Tracy, thank you.
Bonus time.
Bonus time is we have been so focused on how to keep the city running and then COVID hit, and there are aspects of this city that if you just put on your resident hat and you stop worrying about running the city and paying for services, you put on your resident hat, you look around, you're like, this place is aging and it's falling apart, and at some point, our children are going to be grown and gone by the time any of that stuff's updated. I mean, the bathrooms at Brettfield, were terrible in 1996. I don't know if you've been in them recently, but you got to hold your breath. And so at some point, if we as the board do not prioritize we need to spend money. So where are we going to find that money? And we need to find that money. If we don't prioritize that, staff's going to keep focusing on the other things that we're prioritizing. And then as a resident, the residents are going to sit back and say, well, we elected you. I get it. You're still providing me great police service. You're providing me great fire service. But at some point, what are we doing? Where are the other services that we should be providing to our residents? So that's why it's on there, and that's why I will be a broken record all day long today. So as Lance said, I'm going to work until I get a yes from every single one of you, and then I'm going to move on.
Okay, good. Any other comments just about the slide? Because as we go through the goals, we want you to check to make sure that we've incorporated all of your issues. We think we have, but if we've missed something, just like the mayor mentioned one that I know is not in there,
Jan,
then we can add them.
what if
Some of
you,
these we'll vote on, right? Some of these we might strike off of here.
Yeah,
It seems
as
that
we're-
clearly there's some one-offs in here that someone's passionate about, others may be
Yeah,
just simply in love with.
right. And as we go through each goal, we're going to find out.
what if you have an idea that's come since the interviews with,
I'm sorry?
what if you've had an idea that's come since the interviews?
Well, bring
Some
it
of
up
us
now.
might have.
Go for it.
No,
What is
now, or is this the time?
No, no. Well, what
'Cause-
I'd recommend is if we.
No,
could-
listen, here's the thing.
I had a flight and my Wi-Fi was out and I got thinking.
just like the CCBs.
Well.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
There we go.
Take your words and put it back out.
What if we had turntable parking?
So, okay. You know how when mullets used to be cool? They're back in. I don't know where. Anyway, so lacrosse players is weird. But no, this is serious. So I was doing the General Assembly panel, facilitating that a couple weeks back for the COG, as chair of COG. And here's what I know. What city in America right now is doing the best job of wooing entrepreneurs? Anyone know here? Miami. Thank you, Chris. The mayor of Miami is kicking everyone's ass, excuse me, I know this is on city TV, in wooing entrepreneurs. All my friends that are entrepreneurs are talking about it. I'm talking about people with hundreds of employees, thousands of employees that were thinking about going to Texas like Elon that are now considering Florida. This is a real thing. So when I facilitated this panel and I asked these entrepreneurs, some of them with companies that had just raised $230 million, a venture fund in transportation space, what is he doing? What do you think the answer was? What is the mayor, whose name I don't even know yet, but everyone's talking about it. I can't remember his name, but he's a young guy and he's wooing all these entrepreneurs. What is he doing differently? He's listening. How can I help? So Barbara's office, I mean, technically that's part of your domain, right? Barbara, how can I help? Do you have the capacity right now to do that with the number of businesses we have in El Segundo? No, and I'm talking about outreach, like Portland, you're a CEO, founder of a company, you just raised some money, you don't know who to talk to. I'm going to put you in touch, because I'm in the mayor's office, with Jan, because Jan runs this law firm that has connections with other private equity and VCs. It's not rocket science. It's about being, I hate to use a government term, but an ombudsman we used to have in the military. It's like being that. It's being the resource, the point person to direct people. There are so many businesses here in El Segundo that we find out by accident. Varda Space, anyone heard of them? They're building manufacturing facilities in space. Varda Space. You ever heard of them? No. I found out about them by accident through a Google alert, and I invited him to my panel, and I had the guy present. Unfortunately, I started throwing up, and I had to leave early. But I got through 2 panels before that happened. I'm not contagious anymore. But was it good? I didn't even get to see it. So my point is there are so many incredible companies here in El Segundo that we do not know, we don't have a relationship with, because we don't have the resources, the capacity to develop those relationships, to do the outreach, to say, we're here to help, how can we help? We don't need to provide tax incentives, those don't typically work anyway, but what can we do to help your businesses? And that is what the Miami mayor is doing. So the idea is simple. What if we had, in the past we've advocated for positions to add when they've been helpful to like community development, Michael, like it's really important, we need businesses to feel like they can get things done here. When it's been a revenue adding position. And so what I'm asking for, is there maybe a opportunity to consider a position that is solely focused on outreach within Barbara's group and whoever's, but probably there, that can be that person that says, we're here to help, and we do a campaign. And I even have VC funds that are like, we'll help you fund a billboard. Like why they wanted to move here to El Segundo. VCs, entrepreneurs wanted here kind of thing, which would fit perfectly with the incubator public-private partnership. So haven't fully baked it like most of my ideas, but you get the sense. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
We gave up this capability when we spun EDAC out.
Yes.
Right, when they ceased to be a CCB, this is where that capability lies, and that's what's a little bit different in a structure like Miami. But because of the way they're structured, they can do it a little bit more incestuously. So I think this role is really, our Economic Development Corporation, because it's independent, has a slightly different focus that doesn't encompass that. So if we want to provide direction to them, liaison direction, because we can't tell them what to do, but say, hey, we would like a little more of this, that is a position that could live inside of there, but is that a full-time job? Not necessarily. If it was EDAC, I would say it's a full-time job. If it's a liaison to our Economic Development Corporation, otherwise we run the risk of sort of creating an EDAC to sit between us and economic development, which is a little bit odd. But there is clearly a gap we created by spinning them off. We had to spin them off because they didn't have full capability to do what we wanted them to do. But also by doing that, the things they are doing don't hit all the things we want, and that's a particular weak point. So I don't know, I'd be eager for some input. If Barbara, if you're liaising with economic development, with EDCO now, to see if there's things that we should be doing differently to encompass some of that, because that matchmaking is the key part, it seems like, of what Miami's doing, is providing that matchmaking.
So
Can I comment one thing on Chris's comment? The only thing I'll say about EDC is this. I've never been to a meeting, because we've been insulated from that intentionally. I don't think there are any early stage venture-backed companies there.
I don't think so.
They're all large companies, and large companies generally have the resources to get things done. As you know, Chris, you work for one now. The smaller companies are the ones that need to be plugged into the entrepreneur ecosystem even more so. So I think that I agree with you that EDAC, like Lance, you're on EDAC, so I'd love your comments too, and you run a business here in town. I do feel like that EDAC was the thing that was doing some of that for us, because the brokers and others are so tapped in that they know who's coming and looking at sniffing around their spaces. So then we lost that component as well.
Yeah, but having the brokers there was a key ingredient, but
Well,
sorry.
And we really shifted our focus, right? When we shifted, when we put communications and then COVID hit, we really shifted our focus away from outreach and connectivity. I mean, one of the things we've talked about too is like part of that connecting companies and, is also offering that concierge program where, where a company comes to us and say, here's your point person. And and having a concierge, like access to our parks and recs, access to our, so that, if you're gonna do a build, we have direct link to our building and planning. And make it easy for these people, rather than to shift through our website, shift through, like, our big companies that we're trying to attract, or these companies that we're trying to build, they should be part of a concierge program that we've introduced them to, and they fast track. Because at the end of the day, we're gonna win, and they win. So it just, I think that it's a whole program that we need to develop.
Okay, so rather than trying to design it right now, it sounds like there's council interest in the concept. and-
Jan, give me 1 second. So
Okay,
I think it
and
really
then
comes
Bob.
down to one line that Joe said, right? Our expenditures are outpacing our revenues.
Yeah.
In the end, that is the number one sole focus of what we should be doing right now, because that is not sustainable. Mayor Boyles' idea contributes to hopefully bridging that gap, so I think it's important. There are other things here, but for example, determining how to fund capital improvements. All of that is all related to revenue generation. So in the end, all this other stuff that we're putting on there, terrific, but the number one priority is how do you generate revenue that outpaces your expenditures and that funds capital improvements? Because if we can't figure those two things out, the rest of this isn't going to make a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it looks like there's a lot of interest in that, and we can write how that is. Barbara, a
Yeah,
brief comment,
I just
and
wanted
then
to-
let's
Yes.
move on.
I wanted to comment from economic development. Coming to El Segundo as the economic development manager, one thing that I noticed right away was my first day I had an EDAC meeting. And I remember walking in and meeting everyone on EDAC, and then as I was driving home, I went past Torrance Memorial and I saw Richard Lundquist Memorial, wing of the hospital. I said, I just met that person. That's really strange. But really, what's important in economic development, when you have a small team, only a few people, is that business to business, creating the environment for the business people to get together and letting them take it from there. So EDAC was that method for me, bringing the people from EDAC together, who they knew, their networks. Oh, okay, someone comes in, they have an issue with whatever it is, we could leverage that team to really make El Segundo feel like a business community that just embraces new businesses coming in, putting their arms around new businesses. And then we do have, I want to point out, we do have someone on our team, Christina Ravelas, who is the ombudsman or the contact for businesses. So we could do a little bit more to get the word out that she is a resource. She is working with businesses all the time, and she does marketing and promotion of El Segundo as a destination. But that could be augmented and made stronger. And I think something along the lines of EDAC would be very helpful. And the EDC, I think someone mentioned, is a different kind of entity. I haven't been involved with the EDC at all, so I don't know exactly what their purpose is. But the very, very top, highest level person, typically, they could be involved, but they're always going to have to rely on someone on their team to help. With the exception of Richard Lundquist, who never missed a single EDAC meeting, which was incredible. But I think just getting that dynamic group together, that really is finger on the pulse of the El Segundo economy, and also regionally, and having that group convene and be an advocate for El Segundo businesses.
Okay.
Very important.
So clearly there's interest, and so we've captured some of the concepts. So Oh, yes, Darrell, please go ahead.
I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring this up, but since we're talking revenues and expenditures, and Joe's chart seems to have generated a lot of discussion, and, you know, expenditures outpacing revenues forever, the way that if that chart kept going. And I don't know if the council has ever considered a sales tax measure. I'm the new guy, so I guess I can bring that up, but.
Moving on.
All right, no, and I just say that because I've been in a number of cities I've been in, even recently though, with the county and AQMD and the state gobbling up all these local sales tax dollars, you know, we can, as a city, we can only go up to 10.25%. So that, I don't know what the gap is right now, but I know a lot of cities, and everyone does, that have jumped on that in terms of, we need to keep these sales tax dollars in our city. And I just leaned over to Joe, and I hope you don't mind bringing this up, like, what would a 1/4 cent or a 3/4 cent sales tax, it's about $9 million. So I only bring that up as a bigger discussion for another place and time, but, you know, there are ways of generating revenue looking forward.
And we do have that trigger.
We have Measure C passed that
Yeah.
if the county does raise taxes, that we automatically kick in and trigger to the maximum, so that
Okay.
revenue will stay here. Which comes out at 9.1 million was the projection.
Okay.
But Mike,
Up from 8.7.
I mean, realistically, that's only going to happen if the state increases the cap on sales tax statewide, because we're one of a handful of cities now that haven't taken that percentage in LA County. And so if there's no motivation for LA County to put a sales tax measure on the ballot, because
There's nothing
they'll
there.
only get the sales tax
From
for the
us.
unincorporated areas in about 5 cities, or whatever, 8 cities that are left or whatever. There were 88 cities, but most of the cities saw that opportunity to grab it before LA County did another sales tax. So I don't think that will ever get triggered again unless the state increases the overall rate and the county sees another opportunity. They won't do it unless that happens.
So it worked.
Huh?
So it worked.
It worked, yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can look at it that way, depends on your perspective,
Success.
yes.
Moving on.
Okay, all right. So we are going to move on. And so now we're going to just quickly, I'm just going to quickly go over just a couple of edits to the goal statements. I mean, the first one was literally just punctuation in one word. But the third one, the third one was the one, oh gosh, I didn't bring that with me up here. But the third one on the quality workforce was the one that said, Michelle, help me. The, okay, develop as a choice employer and workforce, number 3. And we're revising it, we think, to be a little bit more descriptive, to promote a quality workforce through teamwork and organizational efficiencies.
You know what? I hate to be a stickler on this. To me, that's less descriptive. To me, employer of choice is very clear. Like, we want the best of the best. When we talk about having a gap and having challenges recruiting, employers of choice have less of a challenge than recruiting. For example, I was talking to the CEO of Topgolf yesterday, Artie Stars, and they're not having an issue recruiting people in a tight labor market right now. Why is that? Because they are an employer of choice. People want to work at Topgolf. Beyond me, how are you guys doing, Chris, in terms of employment and recruiting?
Not in HR.
Okay, not in HR. My point is, employer of choice to me defines, I don't think we're there. I mean, I think if we had a candid conversation with the staff members in this room, they'd say we're not an employer of choice. I mean, just being candid here. And so how do we become an employer of choice? It's not all about compensation. Of course, that's a component. It's also about who you work for. Most people leave their bosses. They don't leave organizations. That's usually a decision point. So I don't know why we'd go away from this. When I hear quality workforce through teamwork and organizational efficiencies, like, of course, teamwork's important, but to me, this is about being an employer of choice is about our people, whereas that is more like it's the way in which we work. I think what we meant to say was we want to be the people, or we want to be the organization that great people want to work for.
Okay, so, oh, and that's still in the objective, but other comments from council members about?
I do. I have on
Okay,
number
Carol?
1. So going kind of on the same lines as Mr. Boyles or the mayor. We say enhance customer service. When you say enhance, that means you're not good, right? So shouldn't we say provide excellent customer service with in communications and transparency? Like, and I know we included the diversity, equity, inclusion at the time when that was kind of a hot button, but we already we have a DEI group now, which is a component of it. So does it? It kind of it takes away from providing customer service inclusion or customer service transparency and communications. I don't know. I'm just kind of we stuck it there because it fit a narrative, and I'm just not sure if that narrative. We have our DI group. We're working with it, and it's part of our. We're making it part of our fabric of our city. Does it have to? You see what I'm saying? And I'm just worried. And the word enhance basically says you're not good, right? Because you better do better the next time.
Right.
Where I think we should say provide excellent customer service, transparency, and communication.
Other comments?
Yeah, I think we get a little bit too hung up with respect to the words and not about what we're actually doing to fulfill the 5 things. So I remember last time we went through and it took 45 minutes to talk about a couple different little edits. So my point is, if the 5 goals really were not changing, I don't know why we would spend so much time on this. Let's get to the part where we're actually going to form a plan to meet those goals. That's where I think we should be spending the time, not on a couple words that honestly anybody outside of this room is even going to look at. I don't think it changes the focus of what we're doing on how we word it.
Okay, let's
My
just try,
opinion.
yeah, okay, so let's just try to get a sense from council on goal 1. Are there council members that would like to keep it as it's written up there? And if you like to keep it as it's written up there,
Well, Jan, what was the original? It says minor edits.
well, originally it said enhance customer service, engagement, and then a semicolon, and then diversity, equity, inclusion, or something like that.
Yeah, those were just they were bolted
It was
on.
very clunky because to have a semicolon in that, there was no alignment with the others.
We use semicolons because no one knows how to correct those.
It was very
I think the
clunky.
enhancement is
I'm good with this.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm with
so,
Lance.
I'm with,
okay it, you know,
goal 1's good.
Yeah, when you do it's hard with the workforce pieces, it's hard to compare at-will workforces with collectively bargained ones, so I'm fine with, promote quality seems a little milquetoast to me, but I don't want to, litigate small words either, so.
What was goal 3 originally?
okay, the goal 3, Michelle, read that, please. Develop as a choice employer and workforce.
I don't know,
was-
with all due respect, Chris, I don't know if that changes at will or.
Okay,
Well,
let's just take a little vote. Okay, so council
Employer
members.
choice could be within collective bargaining organizations as well. I don't know. But whatever, I'm not going to die on the sword here. I could
Okay.
go with it.
No, let's just do a little vote, okay? So council members that would like to go back to how it was worded before, raise your hand. Develop as a choice employer. Okay, and those who like it up there, raise your hand.
Sure.
Okay, so this wins, okay.
winner.
Moving on.
I know less is more.
Will there be cookies?
We talked about less is
Moving on.
more.
Okay, now we're going to get down to the meat of things. Okay, so if you would take a look at page 8. So this is pretty much impossible to read.
The color on the back.
Yeah, but the good news is it's all in here, okay? That's the good news. So if you look at page 8, and I think it goes on to page, no, it's just all on page 8. Yeah. Yeah, it's all on page 8. So the question for council on page 8, do these strategies capture your policy interests? Are these important? And as a question, do you have questions for staff, for any clarifying questions on any of these on page 8? And do you disagree with any of these? Because if any council members disagree with them, then we may take a little vote again and
So
pull
I
some
just
out.
have to say, I'm still struggling with number 1, because you guys took out the word engagement, and we put the word engagement in there for a reason, in that we want to engage our community.
It says it there, Carol, enhance our proactive community.
No, but the goal, the
Yeah, we established a deputy city manager position with a 9-step work plan, or a 9-area work plan, all around communication and engagement, to include a website and all sorts of these pieces. So everything that goes into 1A is really about, I'm surprised that that sort of counts as a new item, because communication is such a huge focus for us from the last strategic plan. And clearly, like, look, the website's great. We're still driving people to it. It ties in how they report issues in town, how they receive things in times of crisis. You know, I think that's the 300-pound gorilla of this item.
Yeah, and I think
I'm
it's,
just saying that the number, the overarching goal, enhance customer service, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it just sounds so like we've taken something from that, that's become you know, I don't know, we took away what we had said our goal was, which is enhancing communication and engagement. And now it's just, I don't know, I'm just having a hard time with it, because I just feel it's gonna be dated.
okay, well,
I mean, communication at the end of it, though, includes, like,
I know, but.
it's there, I know what you mean, but I think if you dive in, Carol, the nuts and bolts of these goals, like, we want our staff paying attention to the strategies, not what the bullet point goal is one thing, but actually how we're going to get there, that's, I think, what means more than the title of the goal.
I think Carol's suggesting that the word engagement be added back into the goal name. Right?
We're trying to engage.
I mean,
like,
just, so if that's your
We're trying
suggestion.
to engage everybody. That's the
Yeah.
inclusivity,
Okay.
right? It's about, to me, engagement is about inclusivity.
Okay, so
right?
let's just take another little vote.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't have to, I'll get on with it.
Okay, so you're good with it? Okay, all right, so, council, are there any council disagreements or any questions on any item? Yes, Mayor?
I haven't been the one that brought forth the Veterans Recognition Program. I don't know, I think maybe we change that one to be one that we've started re-engaging the Air Force and Space Force about, because I had Colonel Kay on my panel as well. It's housing, and the thing, I think if I think about 2 metrics that would indicate whether or not we're doing a good job of developing a relationship with active duty military and potentially veterans, is how can we help develop housing options for the base and also economic output? Because we know that base in its works with the fact that a lot of the buy-in programs go through, most of the buy-in programs for Space Force and Air Force go through that base. $2 billion in revenue annually minimum, plus the multiplier effect of all the ancillary companies that are here because of that. I just think the veterans thing, I don't know how you think, Chris, being the 2 veterans on the council, but it just,
There's heaps of veteran programs, and so I think that, like, we're piggybacking on stuff that is probably not in our wheelhouse. I think your Space Force stuff lives in Goal 5 when we get there, because look, they're a finalist to become the Space Force training program among 3 other bases, which means if it's a training program, we're gonna have, 500 students cycling through in every cohort. That's a lot of housing outside that base that we want. So I think that lives in 5, but this veteran one, yeah, I don't know if it's, I think that's something that lives in the police department. I get to tell us if they think it works, so.
Well, I'll say this, this is a plan that our prior chief, Chief Whalen, wanted to propose and run with, but I'm not sure what Chief Bermudez wants to do, but it's something that I'm sure he would entertain.
yeah, I mean, I just would move, like, I don't think it's important enough to, I think I brought it forward. I don't think it's important enough to keep on here, but I defer to everyone else in the council on that one.
I agree.
Maybe it lives as a discretionary part of the police force's
Yeah.
work plan. If the chief has time to shepherd it, it's a nice to have.
Yeah, I'm hearing an agreement there.
I think of it from the standpoint of if a staff member reads that, they're like, so what's the recognition program we're supposed to be working on?
Okay.
You know, I mean, it's too vague. Can I go to D?
Yeah, okay, so just consensus on removing G, but if the police department wishes to pursue something, then that would be a separate work program? Yes. Okay, and then D, go
And
ahead.
item D, the establish a staff and information desk in City Hall to assist residents, to efficiently access city services. One, aren't we kind of doing this now, or is that somebody that's marooned out there in the hallway from development services?
Yeah, that's what I thought we were doing.
Derek?
Rotating,
Go ahead, Joe.
permanent and temp staff, so there is no dedicated staff member for that. That's something that's gonna be coming up, and then the May 3rd budget study session is adding a new headcount for the staff that.
So I have a question. When we developed the website, one of the things we talked about when we developed the website, and the reason why we picked Granicus, was that the website crossed departmental lines. So it was, we looked at it in the development. If you're a resident, you don't care what department anything is, I have a question about my plumbing or my permit. You don't necessarily need to know where each department was. So why couldn't we create a kiosk that is like using our website to say, if you come in to say, hey, you have a question for us, like, where should you go? And create like a kiosk that gives them directional. Because people use their phones and they're much more savvy today than historical. So I'm not sure why we need to have a body when we can actually use our technology and our website to answer those questions.
There can be an iPad right when you walk in the door. What would you like to do? Water bill, Public Works this way, or,
Right.
I mean,
Like, I think use technology, do it everything you do now is using technology. We don't need a staff, a body there just to sit there 8 hours.
I think by the time someone has walked to City Hall, if you ask them, what would you like to do, and give them a chat bot, they're gonna throw that iPad. That's gonna have to be plexiglass and not real glass. So I don't mind, if it's appropriate to put a person there, if acting city manager or city manager says, hey, it's appropriate to put a person there to air traffic control it, I have zero objection.
I would say as long as they're doing something else.
As long as, yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm all about efficiency. The reality, and Michael, you could probably answer this, your counter staff probably handles the lion's share of people walking in. And I mean, there is a sign that says water bill. It's like or it used to be right there, the Public Works desk. And people would still go to the planning desk, and they're like, yeah, go to that desk and ring the bell, right? I mean, a big old sign right there, pay your water bill here. People are still gonna ask. No matter what we do, no matter if we put somebody out in the hallway or not, people are still gonna walk on through and likely go right on up to that desk, because it's the most welcoming, someone standing there, right? And at the end of the day, I would expect any employee within our walls, if somebody walks in by council chambers and is walking down the hallway, and the first person they see is like Mashia, because she happens to be walking out of the council office, I would expect Mashia to be like, oh, well, what do you hear? Oh, yeah, so walk down, make a right, go left. Like, I would just expect any employee to do that. So, I don't see the efficiency in it.
Can I comment? Yeah, no, Gerald, please.
I was gonna say, I'm just trying to reflect on the conversations we had at our department head level when we sat down. This person potentially would be a multitasker. I mean, it wouldn't just be, they'd be directing, they'd be answering. I mean, we get over 150 calls to City Hall a day that right now I think go to someone in Joe's shop. You know, this person would take that on, kind of like a multi-use utility player, if you will, that could serve multi-purposes. And we put it in there because I think with the remodel of City Hall, I mean, there would be one focused area where someone could come in and kind of get information and direction and so forth. So that was the general discussion that we were having.
This is not a new head count, or this is a new head count?
It'd be a new headcount.
New head
Yeah.
count.
Can I feel like we're reinventing the wheel. So I would ask first, what's our standard? And we brought this up before. If somebody emails the city hall or one of us on council, is there a time standard? To me, in my business, if someone emails, 24 hours max, you get back to them. Someone calls, there's a standard. I don't think we have a standard in terms of what our expectation is from a customer service standpoint in getting back to our constituents. That's number one. So I think we don't really have a goal or a metric. Two, many cities, New York and others, have implemented 311 programs. Not that that's the end-all, be-all, but I feel like rather than council getting emails and phone calls and then what do? We send them to Michael Allen and copy Daryl George, or send them to John or ARC and copy you. It's a really inefficient process. If we could ever train our constituents over time, because we had a well-publicized, promoted program, this is the only number you need to call and the only email address that you need, and it's technology enabled, and then we have a standard by which we're gonna get back to people, that would make a world of difference. But right now, we end up getting involved, right? Chris, Lance, Scott, Carol, we get emails. And I don't even know who to tell to call at the city right now. If you said you had a general question, who do you call? I have no idea.
Right.
Is there a phone number, email? No, there's nothing. I think we're making it overly complicated. I think it could be really simplified in terms of having a well-publicized email, phone number that, I don't know how we handle that flow from a technology standpoint and/or manual, but I think there's a big gap here in our city right now.
Mr. Mayor, that was one of the 9 points of the deputy city manager workflow, was that piece. So that lives in here, and I think it lives in 1A as part of that communication and engagement piece of that information. Because that's where Report It came from as part of that same work plan. It was a bit derailed by pandemics, but I think that is something worth reinvigorating.
So, actually, this would be a good time for us to get a quick update on that Report It button. Like, what is the turnaround time? Have we seen, we push it out there, but we haven't received any type of feedback back from staff on how that's working. So,
hang on for a moment. Let's see if we can resolve this first. And then maybe Barbara is able to give a 2-minute. If it's going to be longer than that, it should go on the bike rack for a report later. But on this one, it may be that there's not enough information for this to be in the strategic plan, but rather it should come as part of the budget process, and then the council can make a determination on the staff position. Daryl?
Sure.
What do you think about that? So that would be my suggestion. Just given this discussion, it looks like there's more discussion that's needed. So removing D from the strategic plan, but rather moving forward in a discussion with the budget would be my suggestion. Any objection to that? Okay. So
okay, I have one question on B.
On B, okay. Go ahead, B.
Because we're moving off of that, right? We're moving off of the other one?
Yeah, go ahead with B, your question on B. Well,
So-
no, you're still on goal A, though.
Yeah, so like, but
Goal A.
we're saying implement the city council approved recommendation of the diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI committee reports to city council. Well, isn't that a given that if it's approved, we are going to implement it? So I'm just, like, can we not say something like where we can enhance the fact that we do have this diversity in inclusion committee to continue to look at, like, of course we would implement.
So, my suggestion is that because it's new, and because this strategic plan is an updated strategic plan, it should probably reside somewhere in here. Because it's not in the old strategic plan. Now, when you do your update, and once it's now part of the routine, it can be, once it's implemented, it probably doesn't need to live in a future strategic plan.
Okay.
But in my opinion, it would be remiss to not acknowledge it somewhere, because it is a relatively new body of work. So that's the reason that it's here, because a lot of work went into it. So rather than just saying it's routine, because you do have a lot of work to do to implement it. That's my understanding of that body of work.
I think
But
to
Councilmember?
Councilmember Pierce's point, it seems to be a little bit redundant since it goes into a council meeting, we approve it, it gets done.
It's not a strategy.
It's not a strategy,
Think of it-
it's a policy.
True, but think of it like this. It's stated in black and white in the goal, but a goal without a strategy on how to achieve that goal, is that a goal at all? So that's why I have no problem with it in there, because I'm with you. At the end of the day, the policy has to be set at council, and the different recommendations are gonna come up, and they're gonna make 10 recommendations, and we may only implement 3 or 4 of them, or maybe we implement all 10.
It's worded right, I mean, in the end, we should probably just move on.
And I
because
want to say,
it's
like,
done.
Carol, last time we did this, or I want to say we did like a little
Few years
add-on a couple years ago. That was, in that moment, we said that it was important that we included this into our strategic plan to show the community that yes, this is important, yes, we want to implement this, we're not just pacifying the situation, that we actually are taking an active approach to implementing inclusion and equity into our community.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem, I'm for implementing, I'm just saying, to me, that was just, we should implement it, like, it shouldn't, I mean, I just, it was
But
more
I
of
think, but
how
it's
do we-
clear,
how
so
do we-
staff's not gonna go and, on their own accord, implement their own strategy to achieve that goal. This is like, nope, here's what we're gonna do. We have this committee. The committee is gonna make recommendations. We are then gonna vote on those recommendations, and staff is gonna take those recommendations and go. So it gives a clear path as to how we're gonna get there, versus, you know, imagine if we're sitting at a council meeting and we're like, hey, we heard that this department is doing A, B, and C. Why are they doing that? Well, you know, one of your strategic plans, goal number 1 says this, so they took it upon themselves to do A, B, and C. And it's like, well, that was not our intention, right? So this, I believe, having it in there, it makes it very clear to anyone that works here that this is how it goes and this is the pecking order. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Barbara, did you have a
Yeah, I
comment on
also
that?
think it
Go
just,
ahead.
the strategy was to narrow it down, because DEI is such a broad topic, and there's so many things that can be done, that narrowing it down to, we establish a committee, the committee's gonna make recommendations for council's consideration, council's going to approve or not approve those recommendations, and then the appropriate staff will carry out the recommendations. So I do agree that it gives it a nice direction.
Okay,
So I think we're all good.
Gotcha,
okay, I
yes.
think we're
Got you, yes, move it on.
Oh, okay, yes, go ahead.
Comment. I don't want to go backwards, but item D, I heard you say that we're gonna strike that. That wasn't what I thought I heard.
We're gonna bring it back during budgeting.
Well,
Right.
what I thought the conversation was that would come back as part of the budget process, but
Okay,
Darryl,
okay. I didn't hear
it's
that.
part of the
Okay, thank
budget
you. Yeah.
process.
Thank
So,
you.
but it would, because it doesn't seem that there's alignment on the council to do exactly what's
All
written
right,
here.
perfect.
There's
But
a
it would-
requirement for a capability, we
But-
just don't know if it's a robot or a person.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Okay, any other council
Real quick
comments?
on A,
It may come back to you after all, Travis.
on A, which is
Okay.
an important one of the things that I think we really need we've started to do it and need to do a better job at it, is informing the community of issues. I'm gonna take, for example, the $14 million cold pool that we have out the window over here. I can pretty much vouch for everybody here and realize that the amount of emails and text messages and phone calls and discussions wherever we go, no one really understands what the actual agreement is, why we just can't fix it just because, that this is school property, that it was designed by someone else, and that there was design flaws. So I'm saying, how do we get that information out so the public can see it without us having to deal with it quite literally every single day?
Perfect example.
No, that's great.
Yeah, so I was actually gonna bring up, so one of the things I know I talked to Darryl about is, you know, goal number 1, like each of our goals, it would be kind of, and these strategies, it would be kind of good if for each department to have the primary thing that they need to work on in their department to help hit goal number 1. Like, what is it? Like, is it for Parks and Recs? What is that one thing that they could do? Rather, because some of these seem like at different levels of, you know, in like 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet. Like number A is pretty up here, and then you got number B is you know, it's 10,000 foot, like as far as implement, you know, it just doesn't seem, it seems a little out of whack.
Okay,
I
I
guess.
think that's good input for Darryl,
Yeah.
as he works with the executive team in the implementation of the whole strategic plan.
Yeah.
Darryl?
And I think just generally, and we did talk about that, is that, and I went back to the department heads, and they all, for the most part, felt that their top even 2 or 3 were in this. I don't know-
Embedded, yeah, okay.
But they weren't prioritized from A, B, C, they're in here somewhere, and that's.
Because I mean, like D is like very granular, right? B is pretty granular, and then you got A, enhance our proactive communication, like it's 100,000 foot. So the levels are so,
Well, there's some differences.
Yeah.
So, okay, any other council comments on goal 1? 'Cause if not, I think we can move on to goal 2. Okay, go ahead.
Most of the ones that are continuing are, if I remember correctly, they're almost done, right? Like the 80% done?
Yeah, I think that's true. Joe, you can help with C, or Michael, on C, the streamlining.
Yes. With the exception of maybe F, I don't know. F, Mr. Jones, if you have a comment on that one?
The age-friendly.
Yeah, well, so, I read through the notes on this piece that we have also. It talks about we've already applied for it. It's a 2 to 3 year process, so it's in the works. So it is moving.
So I think to your point is, if these are like rolling off, should we have additional goals on there?
Well, you're going to be updating this, next year, and I would say it's probably better to be, some of these are pretty big, and then make sure that those are accomplished, and then looking at the context of the whole thing, and then making sure that you have the resources to do the whole thing. So, okay.
So I'll give you, I'm sorry, I'm going off on this. So like, goal number 1, enhance customer service, diversity, equity, inclusion, and communication. I know like for the fire department, they're looking at their whole, looking at their department. Dina had like the Fired Up program. Where's their strategy? We don't have anything for fire number 1. We don't have anything for police number 1. Do you see me?
Well, but that's not the design of it, exactly to have every single department necessarily reflected by name in each goal.
No, I know, but I
It's
understand.
a citywide strategic plan. Yeah, and then Darrell will be working with the departments to determine how do they help accomplish all these various things, and that's part of their work plans. So we're trying not to put all of the details into this. So, okay, so let me ask, do we need a break at this point? Okay, let's do a break, and let's come back at 3 o'clock.
1 down and 4 to go, Jan. What's his name? His buddy. Is he somebody
Test. Is that working? Okay. Okay, trying to efficiently move along here and keep us on track. Moving to goal number 2, which the goal title itself has remained unchanged, to support community safety and preparedness. There's a little bit of refining on the strategic direction and the objective. The direction is Segundo is ready to respond to any public safety incident through training, planning, and regional collaboration. And the objective is that El Segundo is a safe and prepared community, slightly simplified from the last set. Moving on to that, here are the individual strategies, the 7 of them. And just as in the last discussion or the last goal, just take a few minutes to just look through those, and let's hear any discussion points or anything we'd like to talk about on those items.
I think 1B should be implement the recommendations of the city council from the DEI committee. Yes. So we take their information and process that into recommendations. That is
Good.
we cannot abrogate our responsibility there.
Collective agreement on that, or any objections? Good. Moving on. Any more?
Did you just say that in A? I mean, in goal number 1?
Yeah, it just wasn't carried through.
Didn't carry.
Council approval. It wasn't carried through.
This has to do with safety, community
Okay,
safety.
I just really have struggled, like, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 strategies, and that is like repetitious. Like, shouldn't that be overarching? Like, I don't know. I'll get off of it.
Well, we could do it either way, because we have 4 topics that DEI is studying, and
So-
they're going to make 4 reports with recommendations to city council. One of the reports is public safety, and so that's why that's in there.
Okay.
One of the reports is citywide organization, which goes under employer of choice, whatever it is now.
I guess.
And then there's 2 others.
I guess for me, it's like, we really should be optimizing the fact that we have so optimize our DEI committee to review and ensure we are, I'll leave it alone.
Yeah, on 1A, without getting too far into the work plan of what that is, I just don't want us to get too muddled in defining a preparedness program. I mean, that has some pretty clear subsidiary tasks that, as long as we kind of highlight that when we hire our new emergency manager, he's got to do the rehearsals, you know, he's got to make sure that we have a communications plan we all understand. All those things are in his work plan, but I hope that doesn't get washed out in A. So if, I guess, city manager, when we look at that, I mean, that's something that really saved the fact that we had rehearsed disasters saved our bacon in a lot of ways, so.
So, and then the one other thing on that, number one, clearly defined disaster preparedness program, one of the things that we had identified that we did not implement was, you know, if there was a major earthquake, we had talked about creating gathering areas, so for the east side, west side, so that everyone knew where to go for, like, if there was a major disaster, if you're on the east side or this quadrant of town, you should go here. If you're on the west side, this quadrant of town, you go there. We had talked about establishing those and communicating out.
So that'll be part of an implementation
Yeah,
plan.
those are all in the to-do list from those rehearsals.
Okay.
Where do we bring the police and fire families to what hotel? Where do we have rooms blocked off so they can all work in town? All those things live under that, so that 1A is a really meaty one, hidden in 2 lines.
I hear you.
You hear me?
Look, we have all new department heads and new chiefs. I mean, it's a big deal.
And you're recruiting for a new emergency manager?
Yeah,
Correct.
I mean,
And our new city manager.
Our new city manager.
Is item E in addition to what we already authorized, which is freezing one of the engines?
Chief?
So there's a couple things here. We separated D and E. I brought today the module 2 from the accreditation process that has, and this is also billed to you through the city manager's office, but it's the community risk assessment and standard of cover. And it goes over how the accreditation process works as far as the hazards in El Segundo, and it doesn't say exact staffing that we should have, but more identifies what the risks are here. Additionally, it doesn't recommend staffing. So there are companies, consultants that will, like Citygate, for example, that will do an assessment that's a third-party assessment, not just my opinion, on what the recommendation would be for firefighters for the city. Like, for example, when LA County came and did the survey, if they were gonna cover El Segundo, they came up with 12. So, you know, it would be, you know, like something like that you would have an assessment come in if you wanted something more than my recommendation.
Okay, so is we already voted on the freezing the engine, I believe. Is that happening, but it's not in part of the strategic plan, I guess is what I'm asking.
Part of the budget. That's not
part of the-
happening right now, Mayor. That's in negotiations with the labor groups, and I don't know, where's Rebecca? If Rebecca can add any more conversation to that, that's okay to add at this point in time.
So we have been in labor negotiations regarding that recommendation that the council approved last November, and we're still at the table on that item.
But the,
6 months later?
yeah, the agreement, I mean, an agreement is not contingent on that. We already agreed to that, so I don't know why that matters.
Who are we waiting on to agree to what we already agreed to?
It's a meet and confer issue.
It's a labor negotiations issue, so we are currently at the table for labor negotiations for the contract, but separately, we are also negotiating the impacts of the brownout of the engine. So we're working through those right now.
So keep E on there.
Okay.
100% keep E on there.
Okay. So any other discussion on the strategies on goal 2? Otherwise, we are there.
One idea is, we're meeting with District Attorney Gascon at what, Thursday?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Thursday, I'm
Thursday.
sorry, Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday.
Tomorrow in Guam.
Do we have anything on here about just, I know we have police services provided in a cost-effective manner, but we have a different environment than we had three years ago in terms of crime and everything else. So I don't know how we're capturing that, or if Captain has some thoughts on that, but we're having a major uptick. And the district attorney doesn't appear to be changing some of his policies, so do we want to incorporate something on that, or not?
So with regards to police, yeah, F speaks to that, but,
It's just cost, that's fiscal.
Mayor, are you asking if we're capturing data with respect to?
No, I'm just saying, if the trend's not gonna change, which is that more and more crime's gonna occur without implications, real implications, and the thresholds for felonies have been increased, then what are we doing as a city to address that, I guess is the question. From a policing standpoint, I know we don't have that many options, but certainly it's something we should be thinking about.
But we are trying to be creative as a police department, and we're trying to use technology to impact our crime levels. And we have been effective in that respect, and continuing building our partnerships with local agencies and impacting crime and so forth. So we're doing everything we can as a department to do just that.
That item used to be fully staffed, right? It sort of changed. We used to say that we wanted full staffing as opposed to cost effective. So we might be talking both in the same. I mean, they could be saying that to achieve our safety goals, we need 180 officers. You know, it might just depend on what we declare victory with.
Yeah, and also like neighborhood watches, I know there's been more of that happening as a result. I don't know, just the two areas that strike me as missing is that one, and also homelessness. I don't see any specific mention of homelessness, but that has been a major challenge for your department, I know, Captain, and for the residents and businesses as well. Absolutely. That doesn't look like it's changing either in the near future. I don't know if you guys saw the Blue Ribbon report on how much money has been wasted of Measure H and HHH dollars, but it's astounding. So, you
Maybe
know,
since F addresses kind of more of a fiscal policy, we could either add something to that or create a new one that deals with some of the, responding to some of the more recent, county, just what you're getting, it's homelessness and responding to the upticks in crime.
Well, and it also goes back to your point earlier, Drew, about listening. You know, we don't talk about listening, engaging our community, because one of the things that did come out of the DEI is about doing community outreach with our public safety, and we don't mention that at all. Like, there's nothing about community engagement, outreach, listening, you know.
I mean, yeah, is there an item H that is quality of life, right? Quality of life for non-criminal matters. Quality of life is cleanliness, hygiene, and homelessness. Quality of life, hey, look, I bang the drum about code issues, but quality of life deals are a code issue. And both of those things probably involve headcount, as does the long-term strategy for neighboring municipalities. I mean, those are budget items too, because we're gonna have someone do that, right? We have to allocate either headcount or consultants for it. But I guess, man, I would put on there an H for a quality of life placeholder.
As all encompassing of
Yeah, I mean,
the
I
variety of
think
these things.
there's a variety of things in there. It's something we could maybe allocate around to different pieces, but.
What's that, Darrell?
I just noticed, I'm glad you put homelessness and increase in crime to be addressed.
Beach camp.
Just make a quick comment. So I know, Mayor, you mentioned, DA and his policies, but what about the state level too? There's been so many laws that have been passed that have contributed to that uptick in crimes as well.
Is that AB 109?
There have been, and then,
54, I think.
I know a lot of,
57, yeah.
a lot of cities too are looking at, alternative prosecution models and things such as that, so.
So I captured this, it can be wordsmith certainly, but if this captures the idea of address quality of life issues pertaining to homelessness, crime, and other concerns, are you
would take crime out of that. I don't want to wordsmith, but those quality of life, that's not for a sworn officer. Those aren't necessarily, that's, I think the crime piece touches on item F, where we're providing police services, right? And that involves crime, whereas this one would be sort of non-crime quality of life, whether it's graffiti, homelessness, noise, at all.
Alcohol consumption by minors.
That's right. Public smokers. Yeah.
And social hosts.
Social hosts. Yes. Rotten social hosts. Ball games.
So do we want to add that as item H?
Yes, please.
Everybody?
Yeah.
Anybody opposed?
Good.
Okay. We will plug that in. Okay, moving on. Jim?
Okay, so then, goal 3. So if you take a look at page 10, and it does spill onto page 11. Looking for council comments, questions, input on goal 3, the strategies.
Well, I think C is the same thing as, I think it's just a matter of wordsmithing on that.
Yeah.
That's all. Should be in there just.
It's the city
approved.
council
Yeah.
approved recommendations. Yes, we'll.
B is a continuation of 5 years.
But it hasn't been started,
Yes,
so
yeah.
it hasn't been started, so it's got to be a new item, right, Drew?
Yeah, well, review and up,
Continued for 5 years.
okay.
We've been talking about it.
You've been talking about it, but it's,
The search for the denominator.
Absolutely.
okay. Okay, other questions or comments? I just lost my pen.
3. So one of the things we talked about is, like a goal for us is to really build our bench and offer opportunities for people to promote. So we have to provide management training or trainings to ensure that our employees are being challenged and trained so they can promote. So I don't see that in here.
Yeah, we have that as D.
D or G?
We have D for training.
Okay, trainings, okay.
Yeah,
No, I think Carol's onto something though about emphasizing the importance of that and with an emphasis on internal versus external wherever possible.
Yeah, so I
That,
think
because
it's,
that hasn't been the case necessarily.
Drew, I think we're talking about succession training, I think is, succession planning is really what I think one of the big things we were talking about. Even when we go out for the new city manager hire, that was a big piece of it. So I think that should, succession planning,
we can certainly add those words
Right.
in D. The intent is to incorporate all of that, I
Right.
think, in D.
Can I ask, I want to ask, I've never thought of this until now, but Rebecca, just, do we have a policy in hiring Rebecca where we first defer to internal? Or is there any priority given to internal, or is it all?
I don't know. Rebecca?
Depending on how the recruitment is opened, if it's open as open and competitive, there's a personnel rule that says that you establish 2 eligible lists, a promotional and an external list, and you hire from the promotional first. You give preference to the promotional.
So that's most of them, or no, not necessarily?
It depends on the position and if it's hard to fill or if it's, an entry-level basic position. It just depends on the hiring manager and what we perceive, do we have someone in-house that potentially would be a successful candidate?
Okay, other comments?
I like the inclusion of G, because I don't know if we ever really rationalize what our real staffing level is. I think probably since 2007, we functioned on a cut till it hurts and cut a little more, as opposed to what do we need to do to actually achieve the things we want. So add that to item 4,000 on your to-do list, Rebecca, is tell us what we need to actually achieve what we want. And
coming-
actually, if we can have some mid-range grades, God forbid we actually have middle management.
Yes, we definitely need to make this a priority, and I've included an item in the budget to accomplish that goal.
Okay.
That's kind of similar, I was asking Joe, for, similar to the zero-based budgeting request we made in the past, more or less, like justifying.
Yeah, so justifying the optimal staffing levels for, each of the departments.
Yeah, justify doesn't mean defend the number of people you have, right?
No.
It's how many
What's
people
the
do
right
I need?
Ascertain.
Yeah. Otherwise, we just look like
What is
a
it?
Braveheart scene with one guy in a crown pointing and everybody running.
Okay, I think,
Yeah, maybe, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, maybe the right wording is the right size to ensure council's policies and directions get carried out.
You want I, Jan?
okay, so would council be comfortable with adding something about council policy? Yeah. That is what it's about. Good,
Still got
okay.
that cookie in there, Drew?
All right, sounds good.
Jan, on I?
Ready to move on to goal?
Jan,
Oh, I'm sorry,
on item
Darrell.
I,
Aye.
if you could just add to the, and this is on a request from the clerk's office. Remember we discussed on item I, develop a work plan institute records management program, and we forgot to add, and other, and related, and program and related systems.
Yeah, and I think this is one where it might look like it's sort of micro and should just be in a department, but it's actually really big, as I understand it, because we had quite a discussion about this. In fact, it's huge. This affects the entire city, so that's actually why it's here.
Yeah, that's why we said and systems.
Okay, I think we're ready to
Yeah,
move.
quick
I
question
have
on
one question.
Jay. Oh,
one-
go ahead, please.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is, so one of the things that we had done by developing the communications department was to try to streamline communication flow. And obviously, our number one goal is about communication, but that really communications outward. So what do we need to do internally to enhance our workforce and enhance our communication? Because communication is, if you have efficient communication, and I know we use the intranet, and you have it here, intranet, but like, is there something else that we need to be doing to ensure that there's a communication flow throughout the department? And,
So, I can answer that one.
and maybe there is, I just don't know.
So,
Barbara has the answer to that.
I'm knocking over a lot of things as I go here. So the communications program is focused on internal and external communications. So we have the intranet, which is our employees-only webpage where we put internal documents that we're all working to build. It's launched, but there's still more that we can put on it. And getting people used to actually going there and using that as a resource. But there's a news and events and staff directory and commonly used documents and all of that on the intranet so that the employees feel more connected to each other. They have a shared location where they can access the things that they need to do their jobs. New employees especially don't, know where to go on the S drive to find something and all of that. And then the external communications is focused outside of the city, but we do internal bulletins using GovDelivery and external bulletins. So it really is part and parcel, the two together.
Good.
Yeah. And there's always room for improvement, so
Well, and
the point's well taken.
Maybe instead of the word embrace, it's train and develop, like, so, I don't know. It's up to you.
I like embrace, it's like actually use it. To me, that means adoption.
Yeah, okay.
People are actually using it.
Yeah, because part of it is cultural, right?
It is.
They're just not accustomed to going to that particular place to obtain information. So as we do things internally to help transition that culture to going there, it will help.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on then to goal 4.
Okay, so goal 4 is to develop and maintain quality infrastructure and technology, with the direction being that El Segundo's small-town charm is due in large part to our beautiful tree-lined streets, award-winning parks, well-maintained public facilities. Protecting and investing in our physical infrastructure assets is vital for the well-being of our community. We perform preventative maintenance and seek opportunities to enhance and replace existing assets to improve efficiency and safety. And we have 14 strategies listed there that are open for discussion.
But wait, there's more. We don't have the downtown specific plan on here in lieu of the general plan. I'm not the grand old man of the council, but general plans are really expensive and take a really long time. And I think the downtown specific plan has urgency over that.
Is the general plan due? I know there's like, is it every 10 years? What's that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. One, downtown specific plan, I think we do have to limit our conversation today about it due to some conflicts, but I will just update. It's currently underway, so I don't know if we want to put it in here, but it is currently underway. The general plan.
It always has been.
Yeah, we're about 9 months out from having that wrapped up, so it will be in alignment with this specific, this strategic plan. But the general plan itself doesn't have any statutory requirements to be updated with the exception of the housing element, which we're in the midst of, and there's a couple other pieces of the general plan that will have to be updated and adopted if we go through a comprehensive update for the entire document. But most general plans should be updated anywhere between 15 to 25 years. Most of the general plan was updated in 1992, so we're approaching that time. We could either do it incrementally or we could do it comprehensively.
Just a quick note on the housing element. Only 4 cities in the SCAG area have had their
Certified.
certified. So it's been a tough go of it for all of us.
Just heard. Do we have a sense of how much a general plan update will cost? The last time around it was $6 million.
Yeah, it's probably still accurate. We do have a fund that has accumulated monies, but we have spent some of that money on the housing element update. We have spent some of that money on the downtown specific plan update. We would likely use some of that money to update the Smoky Hollow specific plan. And all of these things would be done in lieu of a comprehensive general plan update. But again, the general plan itself informs our general policy, land use regulations, circulation elements, which become increasingly important as we go after state federal funding. If these documents are not in alignment and they don't paint the picture of what we want today as opposed to what we wanted 30 plus some odd years ago, it makes it increasingly difficult for us to work with developers, to entice new businesses, to plan for infrastructure, to accommodate any future growth that we anticipate.
So going back to the downtown specific plan for a moment and the comment that it's not included in this, when will that be completed, Michael?
I think we're about 9 or 10 months out from that being wrapped up.
So since it's a heavy lift, and if it's something that the council would like to see included in this, it certainly could be, and that way it's tracked, with everything else. So is there interest by the council in having it included? Who would like to have it included? Thumbs up. Okay.
It's an easy win for you.
Okay.
I promise to get that one done.
Yeah, so if I may, there are a few items, including the downtown specific plan, that require recusal, channeling Mark here, but the mayor and Councilmember Nickel are conflicted on this issue. So to the extent there's any discussion, it's not even decision-making as a threshold, even discussion would.
I wasn't even listening.
Well, the other three were the three that voted.
What are we talking about?
To list it as part of the strategic plan.
But I think, conceptually, if it's just.
Yeah, the other three voted, so you're good. The
So
other three.
we're on there, we'll add it to it.
Arguably, in lieu of adding it specifically, I would just advocate that it's part of goal number 5G, which falls into the category of updating land use regulations to encourage development and entitlement projects. The downtown specific plan is one mechanism to do that. So I would just advocate that many of those things, like the Smoky Hollow specific plan, fall into 5G instead of calling it out specifically.
5G.
Oh, I see, 5G.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Council okay with that?
Is that okay?
Can I suggest, slightly different from the Smoky Hollow, moving on from that, is the implement the Smoky Hollow parking piece? Because that is different from updating the Smoky Hollow specific plan. That is already part of the established plan. That's just 154 parking spots. We're still waiting to paint.
Well, we can't talk about that.
You
without-
can't talk about that.
But we've already voted on that.
You can't talk about
Yeah,
that.
but I voted on that
There's
2
no-
years
There's
ago.
no discussion, there's no vote of certain
All right.
subject
How
matters.
does it feel?
Without recusal, so if
Very
those
well.
that are conflicted want to recuse themselves.
Strike that from the record.
Now, if Lance wants to talk about it.
That's right, Lance, that's all you.
I don't want to talk about it.
Well, I'm heavily caffeinated. One more piece of infrastructure that I think goes along with, this one might sit between 4 and 5, and I think that we are at a unique opportunity and also kind of to gain control of our gateways, whether it's the beach or, you know, the proverbial green space on the right side. And however we decide to ultimately allocate time and resources to that, we may differ in our opinion of it, but I think that we would be well served to put effort into really pressing the city of LA to get a use agreement on the beach where we will manage it, because I think that takes care of a lot of our beach issues if we manage it and get control of that parking lot. But I would like to put that as a point of emphasis on our infrastructure of gaining control of our gateways, because the beach is a glaring mess, the east side is a miss, and coming up PCH across Rosecrans is a miss. I think that we have an opportunity right now, well, we're more successful, I think, than our larger peer to the north, to try and get a hold of those. So I don't know if that sits in 4 or 5, but I think that making the city more welcoming and attractive by getting control of those gateways would be an interesting priority.
I think 4, I totally concur, and I would just, if you're gonna expand on that a bit, I would include the lifeguard station, because that was built a long time ago.
Yeah.
We've been talking to the county about how dilapidated that thing looks. We've also been talking to county for years about getting that plumb. Chevron's an agreement, or was, as opposed to us having to send out
And that may be
trucks.
impossible to plumb to Chevron, but it might not be to plumb to Scattergood.
Yeah.
And if we had control of that slice of property that they're just using to hold spent water on, you know, I think that's something that we talked about as part of the LAX deal, so.
Can we add one more too then, along the same vein, is we started a dialogue with Mayor Garcetti and his staff about the Scattergood property on the south side of Grand Avenue, and potentially getting access to that either through an easement or annexation or something. We gotta make, I would strongly suggest we include that as a priority so that does not die. That discussion began with Garcetti and me, and then Justin Urbacci and Scott Mitnick, and Eric, he assigned people in his group to make that, attempt to make that a reality, working with DWP. So it could either be part of Mayor Pro Tem's, which is, that fits nicely with the, what did you call it, the entryways?
Those entryways.
Including DWP land south of Grand Avenue.
Economic development has the lead on the Greenway piece, you know, and we are not allocating currently money and time to that. They have a whole project going with that. The supervisor's office is really interested in getting grant funding from the state to take care of it. All we have to do is feed and water periodically, but that stuff on the west and signage on the north and south is ours to get a hold of.
If you call it the Scattergood south of Grand. Scattergood, one word, Scattergood, south of Grand property. Please.
So is the, thinking about it as, in the strategy, since the city is not in control, so you can't do it, what you can do is to pursue a use agreement, if that's the vehicle.
I'm not sure tactically, it's really, yeah, it's just, yeah, to pursue,
Pursue a collaboration with the city of LA.
and county of LA, because it's city of LA there, and it's county of LA across the street that manages Grand Avenue and the parking and the lifeguard stations.
So you first have to define what it is you want to pursue.
I think we just want to, it's really beautifying the entryways of the city, and one of those could be the DWP Scattergood land, because right now it's a bunch of huge tanks that aren't used, and they really use it as a construction staging area for across the street at the Scattergood energy plant. And by the way, Scattergood, they're still considering, last I spoke to Marty Adams, the CEO of DWP, they're still considering making that a carbon neutral facility. So that's something we haven't included either, but that if they decide in the next couple of years to make that a carbon neutral facility, that is going to have a major impact on our city, because that means dismantling potentially fossil fuel burning units there.
Okay, we'll probably wanting to make sure that we capture the intent, not necessarily every single word, and help with that. But we have pursue collaboration with the City and County of LA to beautify the entries into El Segundo. And then we could go into some detail, of course, but if that's the outcome that you're looking for.
Can we just say, and advocate for use of the land south of Grand at the Scattergood? Oh, you already have that up
To
above,
include the
don't you?
beach, to include
Okay,
managing
to
a beach parking lot in the beach.
Yeah.
Okay, to include the parking lot and the beach. Okay, and we can work on wordsmithing.
Anything else under goal 4?
Actually, just a couple things. On, let's see, D, F, G, H, all of the big capital improvement type projects, and I know we're gonna handle some of this in goal 5. But one of the things that I think we need to kind of look at is, you know, listing out what our goals are for capital improvements is one thing. Listing out the cost of the actual capital improvement projects is another thing. What I think we need to do is also go to the further step of, is it gonna affect staffing? How much staff do we need? What is the cost of that? What is the cost of the design? And then how are we gonna fund these things? So again, it gets back to, and I think we're gonna handle that in 5, but is there, I just think that, you know, again, not to pick on the plunge, but you have one number that's for the project itself, but we haven't even discussed what the cost is gonna be from a staffing perspective and all that, and kind of extrapolate it out so that we get an entire view of what it looks like. And not just on that project, but on other big projects as well. Is that a viable thing to do, Joe? From a financial perspective, from the finance department perspective?
I mean, you're talking about, you know, resources from, you know, various departments.
Well, I'm just saying that when we hear something and there's a price tag attached to it, that's not the whole price tag.
Right.
So I just think that if we're going to be approving these things, I'm always concerned about the unintended consequences of decisions. So if we're sitting there thinking it's gonna cost X, and really it cost X plus Y plus Z, we kind of have to have an idea what that looks like.
Does 5I address what you're talking about? 5I?
It might, but I'm just looking at, you know, we're listing out.
Yeah, and I think part of what you're referring to is, so you're, let's use the plunge, for example. $15 million, you know, to build a new plunge. However, we need to be saving replacement costs every year, which we haven't been doing with any of our
Right, so I'm just saying,
facilities.
when it
So
gets
we can
presented to
replace it
us.
when that now becomes deteriorated, instead of trying to scrounge for money to figure out what to do.
Oh, I think Lance is saying that plus operating expenses.
Yeah, O&M.
Right.
It's building the
O&M
O&M
and replacement costs.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So a way to deal with that would be, one way to deal with that would be, rather than as a separate strategy, would be as a fundamental principle that would be embedded in all of those, so that whenever there is a capital project or something new, that all of those costs would be identified. So not just the replacement or just the capital, but the operating maintenance, everything. So that would be a way to do it, because a strategy, in a way, suggests, it's done, check the box. But it sounds like it's an ongoing.
Procedural policy.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's part of H, where it's, instead of saying implement the capital improvement plan, it's like develop a funding model for the capital improvement plan, so it can be implemented.
Yeah, so that could be incorporated.
So
Yeah.
the titling we used in some of the other organizations I worked in is an operating plan. So anytime we build a big capital project in Torrance, we had, of course, the construction cost and the cost to get it up out of the ground, but then we had a staff develop a pretty detailed operating plan, which included not only the staffing costs, utility maintenance, all those types of things built in year to year, but also your potential revenue sources that can come in and hold things up. So you know kind of what your subsidy is going to be going out the door.
So, Joe, I'm thinking one way to deal with that might be, as you, every year in the budget process, you examine the financial policies that go before the city council. That could be added or expanded from whatever you have in there now.
I mean, you could even do that directly in the staff report that goes to the
And the
council.
staff
There's a
report,
fiscal impact section, and you just beef up that fiscal impact section to cover all those ancillary costs that Councilman's bringing up.
Those are really critical, so those are.
Okay, because this is a public meeting and we're talking about staff reports, I just want to bring up one thing that we've talked about in the past that I don't think has been consistently incorporated, which is the environmental consideration question. Remember that came up years ago? And the staff agreed and council agreed by consensus that when we have a staff report, there's an environmental consideration. For example, the last time the police department brought up the new vehicles, there wasn't, it was considered, but it wasn't in the staff report. Is this the most economically viable solution, and if not, why? And so if we're going to put that consideration of the operating plan or recurring expenses on a go-forward basis, I'd also like to see that environmental consideration be put on that, because we did agree to that in the past. So I
We've
just want to
added
get that on
that
the
to the
record.
bike rack over there, so it's made note of. Okay.
Anything else on 4?
Okay. So just to be clear on the downtown specific plan.
Wait, I got a question on 4.
Okay.
Does F also include the local travel network, plugging into the South Bay local travel network, which the COG has been working on for about 4 years now, and Chris is intimately aware of? I hope it does. We really want to plug, we don't only want a bike path, we want a multimodal path, a way to plug into the entire South Bay through local travel network that is reduced speed, sensitive to electric vehicles, neighborhood electric vehicles, scooters, one-wheels, skateboards, bikes, et cetera. So if we could just make that a bit more
Multimodal.
robust. Yeah,
Add
local
the words
travel network is
multimodal.
the term that COG is championing.
No objection.
And there's a bill right now being considered in Sacramento on that.
Jan, for clarity purposes,
Yes.
on I know this is something that Melissa was working on prior to her leaving in regards to, during COVID, we had trouble staffing dial-a-ride drivers. We got, spring break just ended. In years past, the the beach shuttle would run during spring break. Obviously, it did not. Summer is upon us, or it's on the horizon. Is the beach shuttle going to be something that gets incorporated this summer? Is it even on anybody's radar? Because there are, the players involved with that clearly are new faces. So I think, it says that it's continuing from a prior strategic plan, but those who were implementing it may not be here. And so I know there was like that Metro Micro that was thrown out as an option for dial-a-ride, but how, is it succeeding? Is it not succeeding? Are we still getting calls for service for people that want dial-a-ride? And then what are we doing about a beach shuttle? Because this was a service that we provided to the community that, I don't want our community to sit back and feel as though we as a city are taking advantage of COVID. Like, oh, okay, well, we stopped that during COVID because no one needed it or we couldn't do it. We don't need to roll it back out and things just kind of disappear. So I just need clarity on that.
It sounds like maybe it's a bike rack item in order to provide a report back on the usage. Would that be satisfactory to the council?
I just need to know what the plan is, because here's the sad reality is, this is clearly, it's a strategy as part of one of our goals, but first week of summer comes and there is no beach shuttle, and then we start asking why, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, hey, this is what's going on.
I can respond if you care.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, Department of Public Works and Community Services, we have been collaborating on this. There were issues with respect to finding drivers. There were shuttle buses that had maintenance issues. So what we decided to do is we decided to do a pilot project, and we've done that, where we allow residents, senior citizens, everyone to have the rides from curb, from home, picked up to the destination. And that I'm gonna, Ricia was working with me, and that was pretty successful pilot project, wasn't it?
Yes.
So that basically allowed not only to keep the services sustained, but even enhanced it, because people were picked up and taken directly to the destination at a very reasonable rate, because we could use prop A money to subsidize the cost. So having said that, I believe there is an RFP out to include all those services, and the RFP, I don't know when it's gonna be due. It's gonna be due in
It closes on the 26th.
okay, 26th of this month.
Yes.
So on the 26th of this month, we're gonna have the results of the vendors that are going to respond, and this is gonna come before City Council for discussion and decision.
Let's take that over to goal 1 to communicate that.
Yeah.
People know it's out there.
Where's the-
Let's
I didn't
walk
hear-
4 right over to 1, so we understand that's out
I didn't hear I didn't hear a beach shuttle.
Well,
Not
yeah,
at all.
the beach shuttle would be included in the services.
So
So,
But so
can
how's
call
it, but how's a kid gonna call Metro Micro to pick him up
Okay.
in a parking lot and have the police officer from Manhattan Beach that has the parking lot closed because it's full, let the microbus through to pick them up? I mean, there are logistics here that,
right, so.
Okay, so when that comes back to the city
yeah.
council, okay?
Okay, sure, I
then-
could respond,
then
but I could
think you're
discuss that
hearing
later, yeah.
Some of the key questions that the
Yeah.
council will be having, and,
Well, this goes
Those
back
should be
to my
addressed.
point earlier about the age demo, right? The microbus really helps the more seniors, but we just saw on that first slide that we put up there that the demo of El Segundo is younger than we thought. And so how are we servicing those those children? And the beach shuttle is something that has always been part of our fabric, is something we've offered. It's been something that people recognize as El Segundo as being an inclusive community, and I think we really shouldn't just wipe it away because, to Scott Nichols' point, we got rid of it because of COVID, but.
is it in the Parks and Rec budget? Has it been in the Parks and Rec budget for the last 2 years? And were those funds used for something else? I guess that's an even better question.
Well, remember, we authorized on council staff to look at, being strongly encouraged by the former environmental committee, now Public Works, to look at using the existing shuttles, because they are so bad in terms of carbon emissions, number one. They were underutilized. So the shuttle's great. I mean, all my kids have used that thing in the past, but it's really underutilized. So I think what staff's saying, correct me if I'm wrong here, is they're gonna come back to us with some solutions from vendors, which will include also
Yes.
some alternative for the beach shuttle. Is that right?
That's correct, that is correct,
That's the game plan.
yes.
Okay, so it sounds like you're gonna have a robust conversation about that when that comes back to the city council.
When are we doing that?
Robust. I like that.
So what's the date on that?
Sounds like May 2nd meeting,
May 2nd?
is that right? The RFP closes
May-
on the 2nd?
The RFPs are back the end of April. I don't think we'll have an item by May
No.
3rd. but-
Sometime in
No,
May.
it'll be sometime in May,
Yes.
by the time we receive the proposals and, yeah, analyze them, yeah.
Well, to
Some-
Scott and Chris's point, it would behoove us to start communicating now that we are looking at this and we're going to have something coming for summer.
Yeah.
Because,
Even if it's temporary, it's something our residents have come to appreciate,
Right.
they expect.
And I can add one more comment if you don't mind. We have plenty of money in Prop A. We are planning on purchasing a first-class shuttle bus that is fully electric and environmental. No emission, any of the, CO2 emission, nothing. And we're gonna keep that because of dignitaries and in December time where we wanna take the senior citizens from one place to another. So that's also in the works.
Okay,
Can we add a strategy to sell the vehicles we currently have so we can get them out of our parking
That will
lot?
be included in
Yeah,
the
okay.
staff report. Believe me, it'll be included.
You got construction vehicles eating up like 15 parking spaces in Brett Field.
Yes.
And you got these shuttle buses
Yes.
eating up a quarter mile of parking.
Right.
They've
Right.
been moved. They're no longer there.
And, yeah,
But did we restripe it so other people can park there?
We need to do that.
yeah, we will restripe and, yeah,
But we just got them moved like 2 weeks ago.
yeah. Remember for the tournament, for the pickleball tournament? the
okay, so
direction-
let's keep moving, let's keep moving. Okay, all right, so goal 5. Goal 5, all right. So, let's take a look at, there are actually 2 pages for goal 5 to look at, 14 and 15.
Last time around, we had is one of the tasks or actions within 5 was to refresh our business licenses and our admin code. And that did not occur, and they're not included in this one.
Okay. Joe, do you have a comment on that? The business license?
So, yeah, we can put that back in there. We're
Okay.
actually working with a firm right now to start that study, but it is probably going to take about a year.
Well, we knew it would take a long time.
Okay. So because it's underway, but it needs,
Right.
it's a big thing, so it needs to be added.
And that's both that and the admin code, because it's kind of they're complementary, similar but different.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So is that a business license fee update? And
Well,
what is it?
Separate from a fee, but it's
Okay.
more of our municipal code and our admin code that defines some of our practices right now and policies for businesses. We're going to update that.
As it stands, we're structured around manufacturing and regulating
Ah,
circuses.
I see, okay.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
last updated, I believe, in the 80s. It was developed in the 40s and 50s, updated in the 80s, and
okay.
obviously it's outdated.
Yeah, we robustly regulate circuses, fortune tellers, and pawn shops, pool halls.
Okay. Okay, so that's got to be added. Okay, good catch. Yes, Scott?
Item E, I recall us having a lengthy discussion in regards to adding language last time with regards to protecting the R1 zone. And that language is not in here. So it clearly was a change, but the change was not highlighted. And I referenced that language in our plan numerous times in regards to, direction staff was being given by our previous city manager. And I think it's very important that it's in there, because we have things that talk about identifying areas within the community that are appropriate for housing, including senior living facilities. We also have engage in a dialogue about housing east of Pacific Coast Highway. But the core of both of those is in an effort to protect and retain our R1 zone. And the discussion we had, I'm trying to synapse it here so that you guys are gonna nod in agreement, and I don't think we conflict out on this, is how can we get the community to open its eyes to other options and the way we were going to do that was by making them realize the only way to preserve and retain the R1 zone is to look outside the box. And nothing in here says preserving the R1 zone. And I'm not gonna let us move on until I get a yes.
Okay, but I think you got one incident, we're talking about economic development and fiscal sustainability here, right? So also, I think we better look at that first slide again where it says 56% of the people who are in town here are now renters. So I understand what you're saying. I don't know if it fits within economic development and fiscal sustainability though. Because isn't this supposed to be strategizing how to achieve these? Maybe it fits in another area of the plan. I don't know if it fits here though. Because I think when we talk about engaging dialogue about housing east of PCH, a lot of that has to do with how do we develop more housing in order to help with the businesses and their employees and retaining employees. Am I correct on that?
Well, and we never voted to have that dialogue. I mean, we historically, we've never put that as a priority. And so I was actually surprised to see that on here, because we as a council have never said that's a priority for us.
Which one?
F.
F.
Well, that's what today is about, to hear comments and if there's.
But how did that get on there? How did F get on there?
Yep.
Because probably one of us, probably me, put it in there.
With council members, some council members specifically said we need to engage in a dialogue about housing east of PCH.
Okay, so we need to have a, I mean, because.
Again.
So today.
Comma,
Okay,
again.
well,
To determine if there are 3 votes for engaging in that dialogue to have, we're not gonna engage in dialogue today, but to have it in the strategic plan to, at a future date, engage in a dialogue. But that's how it landed on.
okay.
Can we go back to Scott's comment, Councilman Nichol? Why don't we just put it in 4? We're talking about updating the general plan while protecting the single-family neighborhoods.
Ed,
It needs to be somewhere, I agree with you.
I think while preserving the R1 zone, what is that, 7 words, 6 words? Could be added to E, it could be added to F. It's as simple as that. You could have that conversation while preserving the R1 zone, because I don't want, Michael and his team going and saying, look, we found all these areas that work for, that would be appropriate for housing density.
I
And
think
it's
what
like, absolutely not.
Should that be in 4A?
I think it's 4A, yeah.
Initiate comprehensive update to the general plan, semicolon.
No, because
call
I
back?
don't
Or
want to
preserve-
put anything, I don't want to attach anything to A, because A is so robust, it's so big, that yes, that would be a sub-item of it, but here's my fear in all this. My fear in all this, and I have, a little PTSD from our previous leader, but it was, well, this strategy of this goal says this. I'm like, I understand, but that strategy of that goal says the exact opposite. And so any goal that says anything regarding housing and density, it's my position, I don't care what goal it's under, I understand your point about economic development, but it's like, I am not going to say, hey, this is good for housing and good for economic development at the dismay and at the expense of the R1 zone.
I get it.
Okay, so Scott has a proposal, so let's just check out that proposal. One of the ideas was to add to E at the end of that sentence while preserving the R1 zone. So that's a proposal, so,
Second. Good.
Yeah.
okay, all right, so we'll just add those.
And I would like
Got the yes, move on.
Well, he said either E or F.
I didn't put them in there.
And so,
I
It should
don't,
be in
I
there.
actually want to remove that.
well, okay, so now we've identified some language change on E, and that's been captured. So now Carol is proposing removing F. So
Right,
is
because
there
to me-
any
to me-
support
To
for?
me, encapsulates that, right, of an within the community. We have to decide if that's even something we want to talk about.
Right, which is, the reason it's here is council members said they wanted to engage in that dialogue. So Carol is saying, let's remove it from the strategic plan. So now let me hear from other council members.
So my whole point in this is, we always talk about why we can't. Let's actually find out what is possible. In the end, we talk about preserving our R1 neighborhoods, yet we're saying no to even discussing anything east of PCH. We're contradicting ourselves. So I don't see there's anything wrong with engaging and finding out what is actually possible. It doesn't mean we have to approve it, but right now, we don't even know what's possible. And you have the Economic Development Corporation that wants to study it, because it might be a very small parcel of land here that has a mixed-use residential, possibility. But year after year after year after year, we talk about it, but we don't even know what's actually there and possible. So that's all we're talking about. I said, then this is mine. I'll put my head out there. Engaging in dialogue doesn't mean you're approving it to be done.
Just opens the door.
Okay.
And the door should, in my opinion, there's no reason for the door not to be open to what's possible. The whole thing is, what is possible? How do we generate more revenue? How do we create more housing? A dialogue is part of that.
Well, creating
Okay,
more
let's
housing
just see
is
where the
creating more
council,
revenue.
let's just see where the
Carol, can
council
I-
is.
Perfect, then why did we just do Pacific Coast Commons?
So Carol is recommending removing it. Who would like to remove F?
I'm just gonna,
Okay.
Carol, I rewind the clock. 7 years, I'm 100% on your side of this coin. After what the state has done to us and seeing what the state has done to other cities, like our numbers, and Michael, you can attest to this because you know it, our number is tiny in comparison to our neighboring cities. What I'm not willing to do anymore is sit back and let the state mandate what we do. I want to have a plan. I want to be ready for the next housing element in 8 years. When they come and say, nope, you need more, you need this housing, and where are your numbers? And I do not want those numbers pushing into our R1 zone. Because as soon as we allow it into the R1 zone, or if we don't allow it out here, and I'm saying out here because we're east of the boulevard now, my fear is that the state is going to shove it down our throats inside our R1 zone, and it's going to completely change the fabric of our community and what we are made of. And that's something that I'm not willing to risk, and that is why my position at this point in life, in time, with the landscape of the state, is to, yes, let's look at it east of the boulevard so we know what our options are. That doesn't mean we need to approve a project.
Right.
Does not mean that at all, but what it does is, in my mind, it hedges us and it protects us from the state forcing something down our throat, if that makes sense.
I just had a comment about,
Okay.
not suggesting this as text, but I think that's a great sort of framing of it, because there is the force of state preemption and having to deal with HCD mandates to build housing, and even though it's a low number, I don't know how we get there. So it's addressing state housing mandates while at the same time trying to maximize local control. I think those are the two sort of things we're trying to balance. But it seems like there's more of a desire to go in the maximizing local control direction. But I think we are obviously dealing and confronting with state law mandates and them, gearing up their enforcement teams and things like that, and horror stories from other cities. So it is a push and pull.
Okay, so let's just do a hand vote. So who would like to remove item F from the strategic plan? 2. Okay, so we have 3 to keep it in.
I will point out, because I like this, and I think I said it to the city manager, that there is a funny joke from the OSS How to Destroy an Occupation manual that we used to give the French of how to do it when you have collaborative public meetings, and it's one of the things is continually bring things up for reevaluation. So we bring this up for reevaluation every 2 years and waste a lot of staff time on it. We're gonna do it again. Like, this is a long list of 5, so if we're gonna relitigate this thing again, it's zombie legislation.
Okay.
I mean, this comes up in the general vote every time. This is a campaign issue every time. And the people of El Segundo every time say they don't want housing east of El Segundo, east of PCH.
I would agree with you 4 years ago, because I was there with you. I think it's vastly different right now.
I think once you talk to them about, okay, what if we did this, this, and this, it always, but we will.
Chris, I think I want to study it because I want to see objectively what's possible, what the numbers suggest. I have obviously some major concerns. I was just on the governor's external affairs explaining to them that 98% plus of our general fund comes from business directly or indirectly, not residential property tax. And as a result, anytime we build where we're zoned for commercial, we're at a net loss as a city. And obviously there's school district implications as well.
Once we study it, though, it becomes possible. Once it's written in a document that somebody from HCD can peer down and read, it becomes possible. So we are the F. Scott Fitzgerald born ceaselessly into the past here.
Is that, to Chris's last statement, is that true? That once it's in writing, HCD can see it and say, oh, well, it's possible, then you can accommodate more housing?
They can decide what your land can. Our threshold for what environmentally damaged property to build on looks like could be vastly different from theirs. And our standard of what a hit to our general fund looks like by converting a commercial property is vastly different from theirs. We might say, hey, we can't do without this Boeing building. We can't put a school here, right? Because this is going to this takes $300,000 of tax money away from our general fund. That's a position we took in 2007. They turned around to the state and were like, you got $300,000, you're fine. Okay. So that's, once you write it, I mean, this was the whole deal with our last go-around with the general plan development, right? When it was getting snuck into that grant money, that we would take $6 million in grant money, provided we spent $600,000 on this exact issue. And we opted not to do it because we knew once we had that in writing, that was subject to Sacramento's review.
Here's the other thing I'll say is, just knowing that 25% of our, I didn't realize that the last census was 25% were 18 and under. The other thing we've heard in the last 6 years is it's harder and harder for multi-generational families, you guys know this, to move into town and live in El Segundo in their own place. It is incredible. I mean, can't believe my son was able to buy a condo on his own accord on Imperial, next to the airport. I mean, the number he paid was absurd. The only way we're going to get there, I believe, with young people able to get into the housing, which is a large part of the workforce, is to find other ways, like micro-suites and smaller footprints. So I hear what you're saying, Mayor Pro Tem. I'd like to hear Mr. Allen weigh in on this and what he thinks, to the point about the HCD, because I haven't heard the city attorney's office weigh in. being able to hold us accountable and actually use that as leverage against us once we commission a report like that. I'd like to hear more on the specifics of that.
I don't think if we publish a document, I don't think they could necessarily hold our heads over, hold it over our heads and force us to implement the document. What they can do is they can utilize that as data to support when and where and why we should be looking at housing and where it should be built moving forward. So they give us a number 500 this go around. And currently, even as it stands today, our existing housing element is under scrutiny by HCD, and they are claiming that we are clustering our housing sites inventory, meaning that we are focusing on very centric or focused small areas that we're allocating our housing numbers to saying it can be built here, and that's a problem to HCD. Clustering housing is a problem with HCD in terms of locating fair and affordable housing. And when you develop affordable housing, they believe that best philosophy is that it's spread throughout the city, that it's not centric to corridors, it's not centric to a particular zone. So one single document looking at one area doesn't give them leverage to say you have to do this, but it gives them data and information to say, well, city, in looking at distributing your sites inventory, you've already studied it, and you know you can demonstrate that it's feasible at this location, but it also forces them or forces us to capitulate to any of their future demands to look elsewhere, including the single-family residential zone. So we end up becoming, we end up choosing between essentially the lesser of two evils. And so it's either explore single-family, explore other multifamily residential zones like R3, which we've discussed most recently. It's explore east of PCH. It's explore Smoky Hollow. And so we have to pick and choose where we're going to accommodate those numbers in the future. Otherwise, HCD will essentially force us to do so through legislation. We will lose control because they will mandate, regardless of the zone, you have to up the density on R1, R2, R3, regardless of what we show in our capacity. So we could say we can accommodate it along the corridors like we have, and they're currently saying that's not enough, which is why we have these overlay zones. And so in the next year, we're going to have to implement those overlay zones where we're taking the 25 units to the acre, and we're adopting a 30 to 50 unit to the acre policy. Now we're looking at R3 on it from another lens in the near future. But HCD will use it, and they can use it as leverage. But I think HCD moving forward will likely focus on legislating as opposed to picking on a particular document that we study. But the point is if we don't look at it, we don't have ammo to HCD when they come at us in the future.
Mr. Allen, knowing the council, you've been here 9 months, knowing the council's priorities, what would be your recommendation, that we study east of PCH or we do not?
I believe that E and F probably can be easily combined. I think we need to look at housing citywide. I think we need to look at it from a wide lens and determine how best we can accomplish it and really preserve ourselves in the driver's seat and avoid criticism from HCD in the future. So I think we need to look at it citywide.
West of PCH, south of El Segundo Boulevard.
So I have a question.
Okay.
What is the rule as far as elementary school location, as far as how far of a distance can you have an elementary school from a housing development?
You could be right across the street. You could share a property line with a
No, but I'm just saying, we don't have an elementary school east of Sepulveda.
It's not our school district, Carol.
I know, I'm just saying, but what I'm worried about is if we expand residential east of Sepulveda, then all of a sudden there's gonna have to be eminent domain on developing an elementary school, which then takes more land away from commercial development for revenue.
I think that graduates the conversation to a whole different level. I think you first have to explore the feasibility, and then you explore the impacts and how to mitigate those impacts and how to address those impacts. And so I think that is a level of conversation that needs to happen after you study the feasibility. And that goes into the feasibility analysis as well.
Okay, so obviously there are going to be a lot of conversations about
So we
this.
never, have we agreed that 2 to 3?
Yes, 3 council members have agreed to keep it in.
Last chance?
Or do you just want to change the language on E?
No, I don't see that. I don't see that. Okay, so we're gonna,
Semicolon, no.
I don't see that. Okay, so, anything else? We have added, the one on the business license admin code update that was left off, so that'll be J.
Jan, are we
Yeah.
adding my proposed language to E and
What-
F?
E, the language, while preserving the R1 zone, was captured.
Okay, just make sure it's on E and F.
Oh, yeah, good point,
Hey, can we just combine them?
And
Yeah,
then,
I mean,
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Can we just combine them? They were originally separated because one is a carryover from the original strategic plan.
Oh, I
One is
see.
new, but they could probably be combined.
Oh, okay, so the proposal is to combine those?
including senior living facilities, east of PCH, included, in an effort to preserve the R1 zone. That's fine. I don't know, just for our community, like, I think I hope what you're grasping from this conversation is, this is a hot button
Yes, I
topic
hear
for
that.
our community.
Mhm.
And in order for our community to understand how are we going to preserve the R1 zone, we have to look in other areas, in my opinion.
Okay, so if the majority of the
The only reason
council's
we're looking is to preserve the R1.
okay with combining those two, we can work on wordsmithing those so that they will now be one strategy. So if you're okay with combining those, please raise your hand.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, so majority, yes.
Chris doesn't have.
Okay. So then we have,
Abstain.
yeah, there's an abstention,
Hands
okay.
are glued to the table.
It's not an official vote. This comes back to you, of course, in a true strategic plan document and for council adoption. We've added a new J, and then we've added over here from the earlier discussion a K, which is develop a robust approach to connecting businesses to each other and conducting proactive outreach to grow our business community. That was based on that earlier discussion.
Right, so that's the incubator, right?
And then the second one is the sponsor, coordinate, and launch a private-public incubator program. So actually two separate things. One is really about outreach, and the other is about the incubator program. So are council members okay with having those listed? Yes? Okay, I see nods or, okay. All right, so we have now gone through all of those, and now, so everything that we've discussed, we've captured the edits, so we certainly are going to make a number of edits to these and eliminated a couple of them. So now we would like to get council's priorities, because not everything can be a priority one, and you've done a good job with this in the past to identify for the first 2 years what your priorities would be. So Michelle is going to hand out 10 dots, because we have about 50 things up here, strategies, and we'd like you to place 1 dot, your 10 dots, distribute them around to 10 different strategies, including the new things. Well, you can pick anything that's a priority. Now you're signaling what's a high priority for you. And yes, some of them are, but for what you're doing is signaling what are the most important things. And you'll probably end up with about 6 or 7 collectively.
Don't get voted on.
Oh, so everything's going to continue. Everything is going to be in the plan that we just discussed.
Oh, everything's in the plan. It's
Yeah,
how they're- it's
these are just the
priorities.
high priorities.
You know, with that in mind, this is gonna sound so tiny, but should we split E and F back up? Like, this is really dumb, but they're kind of two different things for Carol and I, clearly. Like, identifying housing and doing a piece of PCH are not the same for Carol and I. Like,
Can they split the dots in half?
I can give
No.
a half of that. Can I take a bite out of mine? Like, ah.
Well, let's do the, you know, it's up to you. I mean, if they're,
It doesn't matter to me one way or another, as long as they're both up there.
Yeah, let's not combine. Let's, can you just, don't combine E and F.
Scott
That way
had
we can-
proposed that. Okay, drum rolls. I can share what the priorities are. We've lost some council members. So the ones that are remaining are the ones that get to take the lead. How's that? Got the mayor pro tem here. So the ones that received 3 or more dots, analysis to include a response coverage study for the fire department, determine staffing. The new one that was added under goal, oh, I'm sorry, I missed this one. Goal 1, enhance our proactive community engagement program. So Barbara, you're going to be busier. Goal 2, item E, that's the fire department's response coverage study. And then the new H that was added, address quality of life issues pertaining to homelessness, graffiti, noise, and other concerns. In goal 3, G, determine optimal staffing levels. Goal 4, the technology and infrastructure. B, identify parking solutions, received 4. And then H, implement the capital improvement plan for parks, recreation, et cetera. And then at goal 5, there were actually 4 of the strategies that received 3 or more dots. One is the Smoky Hollow Business Zone. H is the long-term financial analysis, dealing with fiscal sustainability. I, opportunities for new revenue, enhancement of existing revenues, et cetera. And then K, a new one, develop the robust approach to connecting businesses to each other and conducting proactive outreach to grow our business community. So those are the ones that received the most dots. And again, everything that the council agreed to will be in the strategic plan for the 4-year plan, but these items are intended to receive the priority and show the areas of emphasis. So with that, I think what's up next is Daryl. Talk about how progress is going to be reported.
Okay. Well, now that we've all done this amazing work today, how do we report back to you the progress that we've made? So we've outlined a few objectives here of hopefully being able to get that information across, starting with doing reports twice a year in the form of maybe a receive and file item that we bring to the council a couple times a year. We'll go through the report and essentially just give you a progress, where we are, maybe completed, in process, or we need another 6 months. So just kind of give you the timeline on where things are at with the particular strategies. Information will also be on the website about the council priorities. So again, getting out that information and will be helpful too in letting the community know that we're all working on this plan together, this strategy. The priorities will also be shared with staff, commissions, committees, and boards. Again, just being transparent, getting all the information out, and letting them, and also with these periodic updates, to letting them know where we are. And then finally, highlights will be used in public communications throughout the year. So once we've achieved a particular goal, maybe that'll be an opportunity to let folks know this has been completed and how we were able to achieve that. So really, we want to make a very conscious effort to keep this plan active. You've always heard we don't want to just do this and put it on a shelf. And I think our, as staff, as department, as executive team, I know we've all come together to want to use this plan effectively so that we know where we're heading and we know where your priorities lie. And again, it was very helpful to see that, and looking forward to seeing where the high priorities are. But again, all of these are important, and we look forward to just beginning down the path in all of these.
So I have a question. On the publication of these goals and strategies, are we going to put prioritize them, so the ones that got the 3 dots are gonna be first, and we put like an asterisk by them, because one of the things that, oh, so you're gonna do it, yeah.
So in the actual document, thank you. So in the document, there's a page, number 7, that is pretty blank right now. But this is intended to have the council priorities, will populate this page.
Right.
And then, to your point, we will, in the rest of the document, indicate which ones emerged as the council priorities, the rest of it, so. So yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, and also, like, if you look to the mayor's point, you know, if you look at across, you know, goal number 5 has a lot of high priorities. So how do we make goal number 5 goal number 1?
Well, I think that it's essentially by having them listed here as the city council priorities, that signals what the council is really going to be focusing on, rather than reordering the
Well,
goals.
Does it matter? Like, why don't we make goal number 5 but goal number 1?
Yeah. Well,
If that's where we put all of our dots,
well,
I know it shouldn't matter, but when you say it's goal number 5 versus goal number 1, it does.
well,
Just
I
a
wouldn't
thought.
really recommend doing that, because then you'd be restructuring the whole plan
Okay.
and all of the goals every year.
Yeah, I get it.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so, yes.
One logistical question too, on conveying going back to the boards and commissions and committees input. Am I correct that we decided to keep that kind of as a flowing dialogue with them, or, you know, we're gonna go back to them to get more input, or is what was received in this memo the kind of the final input?
Yeah, I think the council's input was that
I think
that
what we
was.
talked about was making a correction of it going forward, where the input that we request is pertaining to their purview for that particular commission. So it's almost like us trying to figure out what they're, like, trying to help them develop their own work plan. So they should be focused, I believe it should be agendized, on their meeting to discuss it as a group, rather than having 5 committee members and 5 people, you know, giving input. It should be as a committee, in my opinion.
So the recommendations of the commissioners is not something that we as staff need to be pursuing, because some of these, like for instance, the environmental, but those are hard and fast recommendations that I know Public Works has concerns about, but, you know, that would take a.
No, for instance, their microgrid idea, it's a pretty valid one, right? So the new emergency manager, under his guides to develop a robust emergency management plan, one of his recommendations might be, hey, they're right, we should have a solar backup battery next to the radio station at Hilltop. I mean, that could very well be a part of it. So I think it informs those things, but those aren't in and of themselves standalone pieces of guidance.
Great,
Good.
that's helpful.
Okay, great. Okay, we're at the wrap-up. How about that? And we're right on time. So we will be preparing the final version of the strategic plan for adoption. Of course, it'll be your plan. If you want to make changes at adoption, you can do that. But we'll be taking all of the input from today and all the council's direction from today. And it will be going, I think, back to the council, the first meeting in June. Is that right, Joe? Yeah, first meeting in June. Okay. And then staff, of course, will be proceeding with the budget process. Yes? Did you have a comment?
Oh, is that a puffin or a penguin?
That's puffin. Good job.
Yeah, there you go.
And then we're at the final comments. I would just like to offer council members an opportunity to make a comment about the time you spent today with your colleagues and the value of it. So maybe starting with our Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to salute my fellow council people on getting most of these almost right.
Wow, how'd that feel?
No, thank you very much for this. It's I think this process is something that we've winnowed down. I think what's really interesting is when we used to get a full, phone book of continuing projects, the sheer volume that have been closed out by the staff is really, I think that's something reassuring. Having been just a voter a few short years ago, you feel like projects just linger, and they clearly don't just linger. So they've knocked a lot of them off the list, which is really a pretty remarkable testament.
What are your comments about spending time with your colleagues today, Lance?
What is my comment about spending
I
time
want to
with
get
my
closer to the
colleagues?
mic, closer to the mic, closer to the mic.
Are we talking about the process? I think the process was a great process. It was nice to be able to see it and then be able to add to it. I think there was some good discussion here, and I think it put us in a better situation going forward.
Great, good, thank you. Scott, your closing comments.
Closing comments. I hope you guys are comfortable. No, I think that this process is wonderful. I think it's one of the most important things that we do annually. And honestly, I was kind of sad that there was not one public comment. There was no one from the community here. I don't know if it's the fact that we do it in the middle of the day rather than the evening. I'm not sure. I think that in everything, you guys are on social media as much as I am, watching comments and reading statements, and there's people that are like, oh, I wish the city did this. It's like, we talked about that 2 meetings ago. Oh, I wish the city focused on this. It's like, well, that's strategic planning. That's what we're about to do. And so I think in the future, if there's any way that we can, what is it? Goal number 1, right? Communicate this meeting more and the importance of this meeting. And, because having the public's input on this, we all have our limited lens, which is just life. And we come here with that limited lens and say, well, this is our vision for the city. And sure, we're the elected, so we're the ones who are in charge of that. But it's really important for us to listen to the community. And so I would love more community engagement in this process moving forward.
Your closing comments, Carol?
Yeah, so, myself and the mayor were here at the beginning when we first did this, and we've come a long way. And I just want to commend everybody for participating and taking it, taking it seriously. And we have accomplished a lot in the last 5-6 years. And I just would like to encourage the department heads to bring your successes to the council, because there's a lot of times we take them off the box because we check them off that we actually accomplished them. But if we don't communicate that out to the public, we don't know. And it's important that we give kudos to the people that actually accomplished these tasks. And thank you. And it's kind of ties to the whole KPIs. We should be looking at those KPIs, and hopefully KPIs should be constantly reimagined once things have been implemented and changed for efficiency. And I just want to make sure we're recognizing the efforts, and please bring those accomplishments to the council.
Thank you. Mayor?
Drew, while you're reconnecting your microphone, I forgot to say something. I think it's really important. I thought about it when we were voting up here. All the department heads in the room. I think it's important that you understand that they gave us, Jan, you only give us 10 dots, right? 10 dots. And so some of these items that don't have a dot next to it, if this was an item that was near and dear to your heart, please do not think that we as the council could care less about what's important to you, because that is not the truth at all. If I had a dot for every single one of these would have a dot next to it. That's just my personal opinion. It's just really hard when you only have 10, and then once your colleagues start voting on things and you realize, well, something with 2 dots means nothing, right? So you need things with what's getting support, what's not getting support. So I hope that if you're here and you see an item that you were passionate about and it got no votes, please don't take offense to that at all.
Give more dots.
I've been known to double fist, so wait, this is publicly recorded.
So, other one works better.
Thanks anyway, Barbara. Live from the communications department at Dead Mike. I'm kidding. We at council, oftentimes staff comes up to the dais and they've got a staff report, and we come off and we're critical and challenging and demanding, and sometimes not even that polite about it. And so on behalf of the council, myself, I want to apologize, number one, if that happens, and know that we mean it to come from the best place, because we care a lot about what we do, and we know you do too. And that becomes clear when you look at the Net Promoter Score, which we've done 4 years in a row now. And Apple, everyone loved their Apple products pretty much. Anyone not love Apple?
Who doesn't love Apple? Okay, you Droid users. Yeah, head of IT, figures.
The head IT.
Right. Well, most people love it, Charles. Anyway, Apple's like at a 65 net promoter score. Where did we end up on the residential last survey?
I think it was 50.
50. For a government organization, you all should feel really good, because the question you ask for the net promoter score is, how likely are you to recommend El Segundo as a place to live and raise your family? How likely are you to recommend El Segundo as a place to locate your business? 1 through 10. 9 to 10 are promoters. You take the percentage of promoters and you subtract the percentage of detractors, which are 0 through 6. You throw out 7 and 8s. 50 is tremendous for any organization, let alone a city. So I want to remind all of us that we are doing an incredible job of delivering on these 5 goals and the priorities and service in this town. And so thank you. And then I ended the closing sessions with, we're going to get to alignment by the end of the day. And I'll close with that. We absolutely, I believe, are aligned. It's clear to me that my colleagues, we are aligned on what the direction is for the city for the next several years. So thank you to Jan and your staff for doing a great job, and Daryl and Joe and everybody that's been involved with this process. And I'm really looking forward to the next couple of years to get these things done. So thank you all for spending so much time. We got a lot of horsepower in this room for this meeting. So thank you all.
Good, and thank you for the opportunity to be here on behalf of Michelle, Jared, and myself. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you. And you will be receiving in your email from SurveyMonkey an evaluation for today. So it will be very short. I think it has 4 questions. It'll be about a 20-second survey, I promise. And we would invite you to take it and give your feedback about today's workshop. So thank you very much, and you're out early.
Awesome.